Stick Show. Ryan Stick Show. It's the Ryan Stick Show. Ryan Stick Show. It's the Ryan Stick Show.
You know, tonight's going to be filled with professionalism when I play the wrong theme song before we even begin. Welcome to the Ryan Stick Show. I am your host and namesake, Ryan Stick, and tonight we are talking about the greatness that is the 90s of all sorts of kinds: video games, television shows, comic books, the works, just the greatness of growing up in the 90s with my friend and talented as fuck human being, Erik T. Mullins, or Erik Teren Mullins. He has three names, and we're going to go through all of them tonight, each and every one of them. And I'm going to bring him in right now because there's no point on holding back. Here we go. Erik, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Ryan?
I like the use of all three names.
Man.
You go by Erik T. Mullins, Erik Teren Mullins. Erik Teren Mullins is like the professional name, right?
Yeah, I try to put in the whole thing because at one point, years ago, when it was just Erik Mullins, I realized there's a lot of Erik Mullinses out there. So I'm like, I might as well put my middle name in there.
Yeah, there's no Ryan Sticks out there, but every time I Google my own name, I'm brought to this kid's YouTube channel called Ryan's World, and he just crushes me in views. So every time I try to find myself, I just get comparatively jealous, like that dude in I Am Amadeus. That guy who's just I wish I wrote all the good songs, but I'm like, dude, it's a child, let it go.
And what's funny is a name like Ryan's World, he for sure has his own Sonic OC.
I know. And the thing about Ryan's World, it just would have been my tribute to Wayne's World. In fact, when I was starting out years ago, when I was doing our show called Season 0, I'm like, I should have a show called Ryan's World. And I should have, because that kid wasn't fucking born yet. And I definitely would have had that name, because I've been on YouTube for 10 years now. With other projects. Anyway, enough about complaining about the success of youth. But dude, you're here today not only to talk about the 90s, but you also are launching a Kickstarter, man. You're putting yourself out there. I love that, man. I've been supporting Kickstarters all year. I've been having people on to talk about it. I think it's awesome that anybody is willing to say, you know what, if people aren't going to put my stuff out, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to will my art into the world, and your art is fantastic. So tell me about Blithe.
Blithe, well, I don't know how deep you want me to get in on this. When I first created this manga comic book thing, I guess it was 2006, and I was in school just doing doodles. I'm a huge fan of games like Disgaea, Hour of Darkness, where you kind of play the demons and the bad guys, and the angels turn out to be the bad guys, but only because you're playing the villains. And I thought that was really cool. I thought the whole world building they did in that was amazing. And I started just creating my own universe and my own characters and my own cultures. I did that for a long time, about 8 years before I felt comfortable to start making my own thing. And because I love Western style comics and I love Eastern style manga, I wanted to kind of do a mash between the two. So the format and even the storytelling is really more Western, but the art style and the coloring, which is something I was like, I have to color this. I love color.
I must draw you.
Yeah. And fun fact is I'm actually color blind. So I have this huge list of colors.
Out.
I know. So I've got this huge list of colors that I went through with my wife, girlfriend at the time. And she was just this one, this one, this one, this one. I'm like, thank you. And because I can still see color. It's just that there's certain ones I have trouble with. And I wanted everything to look 90s fluorescent. It's funny that we're talking 90s because my whole manga comic is super 90s. But that's kind of my whole inception to this thing.
So right before we really go deep into the 90s, I mean, just people right now, they're like, hey, Erik, it's got three names. He's a nice fellow. Hello, Benoit. Where could people support this dream of yours,
Well, currently it's all up on my Kickstarter page. I have links to that Kickstarter all over the place on my Instagram, on my Facebook, on multiple different Facebook groups that I'm a part of. I try to post them there because Kickstarter was not kind with my my link. It's not just Blithe. Click like kickstarter.blythe.com, which I was hoping for it. Wrote this mega long sentence. I'm like, that seems kind of all right. So I'm just I post it everywhere I can, you know, like that way people could just click on it and they don't have to like type it all down.
Nice. Benoit, who's watching right now, is a massive Turtles fan, and even in the link in the comments before we even began this, we were geeking out about the IDW Ninja Turtles run. And one of my favorite things, it's a keepsake in my office. Like, you can't see it on camera, but I have all 4 of these. And what you did when I was passing by your booth one day, that really, like, you're an artist we've met at various conventions. Funny enough, actually, I'll tell you guys this, how the first time I met Eric, I don't even think he remembers this, but
No
I
way,
do.
man. I see
And
thousands and thousands of people at a convention. I definitely
know.
remember you every
I
single
know.
convention, but
I'll
I don't
tell you
remember the first time.
but Ben, check out this. So Eric has drawn these things from Turtles in Time, and there's 4 of them, and but Leo is versing Super Shredder, and Donatello here is this is Metalhead, and it's really, really cool, like the detail you put into this stuff. And I'm blown away by your interpretations and of famous characters, but at the same time they seem very you, but but they don't, you know, they seem legit is what I mean. I mean, it could have been from it, but at the same time, it's got that Erik Teren Mullins thing. So was that difficult to do, to be kind of like, I'm going to draw Carnage, and it's going to look like Carnage, but at the same time, it looks like something I did. I mean, you're not a tracer by any means, but at the same time, you know, it looks like it just jumped off a page too. Is it difficult to
Well,
do that?
I do ink my own stuff. Like I pencil, I ink, I color, I write, I do everything.
Mm,
So in theory, I do trace. Sorry, all you inkers out there, but for real, finding good inkers is tough. It's more than just
yeah.
tracing. It's a lot of work. Um, I don't know, man. Like when it comes to colors in particular, like I said, because I'm kind of colorblind, I tend to always go for more oversaturated colors, and I love purples and pinks and stuff like that. So I put a lot of that in my comics and my drawings as well. But like with the turtle one that you showed, you know, like the colors in that are super vibrant and they really pop. Feels kind of 90s, but again, it goes with the way that I see colors. So when I'm like, oh, this is bright yellow, because if I put a bit of green or the wrong kind of shade of red in there, I might not see it properly. So I just go for those big, vibrant colors as often as possible. When it comes to drawing things like my Western style comics back in the day, like the Carnage you spoke about, or Venom, or things like that, I took heavy inspiration from Mark Bagley, who is, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
talk
Oh my God.
90s comic books?
Ultimate Spider-Man is the greatest fucking I love Ultimate
Amazing
Spider-Man
run.
so much. It's
Yep.
but to me, Ultimate Spider-Man got me back into comic books, and Bendis and Bagley, I don't know what the fuck. Every fucking page made me laugh, cry. I felt every punch. Bagley is a god.
Yeah.
I can't, everything. Bagley, if it's not Bagley,
But
when Bagley left Ultimate Spider-Man, I got disinterested. So please keep going on about Bagley, but
yeah.
fuck, I'm so glad you said his name.
So
Yeah.
his run in the 90s, like you'd be looking at like Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, and the artwork is like by Larson, a few other really great artists at the time, and they were good, you know, especially at the time. It's just that then Bagley would have a cover page and you're like,
Yeah.
there's no way the interiors look this good. And then you'd be like, what the heck, man? Like his Venom, like, you know, like I love his Venom because, you know, you had Tom McFarlane that had the teeth, kind of felt like a Joker kind of thing. And I love that too. It's creepy. I'm a big fan. But Bagley gave it the sharper teeth, kind of made it look like a piranha or something kind of head, and like with the tongue and everything. And I love that. So like for me, that's like the perfect Venom. It's like monstrous, but still kind of human. Like, and then after that, Larson started going with the whole, what is it, the Violator from Spawn, where it was like that and all the teeth, and then it started to lose me a bit. But I've got a lot of friends that love that, and so it's, you know, it's like personal preference. But man, Bagley is awesome, and so when it comes to drawing a lot of my stuff, I always like follow him and the way he would draw his stuff back then. So like even that Carnage, I thought specifically of the Maximum Carnage game for the Super Nintendo, where you had like Carnage looming over, and all that was Bagley's artwork in that game. I actually had him sign that game. Like I showed up, long lineup of people getting comics signed. I'm there with my Maximum Carnage game, and he's like, "What?" Nice. And he was a pretty cool guy. And man, yeah. So my Carnage was really like in my head. I'm like, paint the town red. So I drew them all hacky, and then like, I remember the splatters in the back. I was like, what am I going to do for a background? And I just took paint, threw it on a piece of paper, scanned it in, and I was like, yeah.
Let me see if I could find. Let me see if I could find your Carnage. I believe I had it somewhere, and I definitely want to show everybody because it's a hell of a
Everybody
Carnage.
talking about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a hell of a Carnage. Okay, so this is Carnage I got. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, here we go. Okay, cool. So this Carnage, I love this Carnage because I could still be on screen this way. I love this Carnage because I came into Carnage when Carnage was already the fucking man. Like, arguably, much like the WWF, when as soon as the bad guys started to get popular, there was no babyface anymore. It was cool to root for the enemy. Same thing can go. I think Venom and Carnage are largely responsible for that on the comic book front because Venom and Carnage were the coolest characters in the world. Everyone still loves Spider-Man, but Venom was, and Carnage especially, Venom was awesome and Carnage was worse. And Carnage made Venom a hero by default because he was such a bastard. And the very idea that he's got the power of a symbiote that can turn into all these knives and axes and all this other stuff that Eddie Brock isn't sadistic enough to think of. It really blew my mind. And the separation anxiety video game is the one I really like because I liked it. You could be 2 players.
I know.
Yeah, that Maximum
That's
Carnage game fucking killed me because I love the button you could push where you want Daredevil to come in or Captain America. And
Yeah.
it just opened up the Marvel universe to me way before any of these other movies did. But tell me
So-
about you discovering, Maximum Carnage, because I think I'm a few years old.
Oh man, and I've got a crazy story for. I've got a lot of.
Nice.
Okay, so
Do it.
just to set everybody up, like set the stage here. I'm 37, and I've lived some crazy ass stuff in my life. All right, like I've been through like. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into it, but let's just say like I've seen some horror stories where you're like, what who runs into stuff like that? Maximum Carnage. Okay, so when I grew up, my parents didn't have like a ton of money, all right, and I would always get my games used and things like that at flea markets. And I used to live in Nova Scotia. There's this massive flea market, and I would always get my stuff and I'd trade things there. And at one point, my birthday's coming up, and I'm like, it's coming up in like several months, and Maximum Carnage just came out new. Obviously, can't find that thing at the flea market. And I was like, parents, please buy me this. I'm begging you to get me this game. I'll do anything. And they're like, we'll get it for you, but we're not going to give it to you till your birthday. I'm like, it's like 6 months away. And I'm like 10 years old or 11 years old at the time. And so we go go-karting. And back in the early 90s, it was not required to have helmets. So I remember racing and the person next to me hitting me. I spun out. My 2 front teeth went through my lip. These are fake up here. And I remember getting up and I'm like, what's going on? And like my parents are like, oh my gosh. And then like they bring me in a bathroom and they're pulling out teeth. And I'm like, I go to look in the mirror and they're like, you don't want to look in the mirror. And I move their hand away. There's blood everywhere. I'm like, oh my God. And then my mom's like, if you're good and you don't freak out too much, I'll give you your Spider-Man game. And I was like, ah.
Oh my God. That's
I
hilarious.
still cried, obviously, but man, and that was my story, and that's how I got Maximum Carnage. And once I got it, it was the hardest game I'd ever played in my life. For real, the AI in that game, the police all gang up on you. If you're like beating up one guy, other guys run to you and start hitting you from the back. So it's like you can never stand there and lay a full beat down. You always have to like run around and hit people constantly. Man, that game is nuts. I know I have a lot of friends that hated it growing up because they could never get past, like they could get to Venom, and then once they got Venom, they would usually die in like the first level. And honestly, like when you own games as a kid, man, you rinse and repeat until you get good.
Yeah. There's just no feeling of, oh, I died twice, move on. It's like, nope. Once you committed yourself to owning a game, that game was expensive, and you're gonna play the shit out of it.
Yeah, and no saves. Oh man, the amount of times I had to redo that game.
I wasn't very good at it. I've never finished it. I should watch it on YouTube, like, just completed. But I always would get to a certain part. But yeah, no, the bullies and the AI, like they were very good. And then there was those girls who
with the hair.
With the hair. So there was no like, there was no men and women could both beat the shit out of me equally.
Yeah, man. And Shriek. Oh my gosh, yeah. Shriek would like start pounding the ground with their like lightning things, and then she was so annoying. Like she would just beat you up so bad. Like you'd have to hope that you get that special character of Dagger, because if she came in, she would take care of Shriek pretty quickly.
That's
which was pretty
true,
cool.
actually. Really
Yeah.
cool that Cloak and Dagger were such a pivotal part of that, but they're a
Oh,
part of the
Cloak. He's so great. I love
Do you,
Cloak.
do you like Eric? Your microphone is really loud, just a little bit. Is there any way you could turn it down just a
Oh my
hair?
gosh. Hold on. I'll see if I have access to these technologies you
If you
speak of.
don't, who gives a shit? But I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I think.
Would it be under sound?
Yeah,
Test
yeah.
your mic. Device
You could
property.
just turn it down just a hair.
All right.
Anyway,
Check. 1, 2. Hold on. Is this better? Or do you
yeah,
want me
it's
to turn
much
it up?
better. Oh yeah.
Okay. Is
It,
that good?
it's
Or
just
do
a
I put
little
it
low.
down
Yeah.
lower?
No, it's good now.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
put it
look
up
at
just
me
there, just there, just
figuring
there.
things out.
This is what we do live because we don't give a shit. It's great. But speaking of not giving a shit or giving a shit, I only read the Maximum Carnage comic book way later after playing the video game, and I was kind of like taken aback. I'm like, so the whole thing they win because of a good bomb, and that is what it's called. It's a Goku style giant white fucking positivity bomb that he throws at Carnage. Did you like the video game more or the comic book? Because I gotta say, the comic book is okay, but that video game is part of me.
So I definitely prefer the video game, especially since it was comic book in motion, right? It was like,
Yeah,
I mean, you see people making YouTube videos that look like that now, or like animated comics that look like that. And that Maximum Carnage game must have been one of the first. I don't know if it was,
yeah,
but
yeah,
for
yeah,
real to show the pictures and have that music like doom 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 doom, and you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
cool. And then like Carnage would show up with little sound effects. Oh, J. Jonah Jameson freaking out. Like that was awesome. Reading the actual comic book, it was rough, man. Like we were talking about how great Carnage and Venom are. Well, unfortunately, they really like didn't get the best story arcs throughout the years. I mean, I got to say that my favorite Venom story arc was probably Agent Venom. I love the Agent
Alright.
Venom series so much, and I thought it
Yeah.
was unique and fresh and cool. I mean, even when you think of like Venom when he had his first original series back in the day, Lethal Protector, like the first few like issues were really cool, and then slowly you're like, uh-oh, this is going nowhere. And then it kind of ends nowhere, and you're like, oh man, like Venom is not an easy character to write, honestly. Like he almost makes me think of Superman, where it's like, you got this character that can do all this awesome stuff. How are you going to write that? Like you get some good stories for sure. It's just that a lot of them suffer, and Carnage was rough because it was violence for violence. Like the whole point was no plans ever, and
Sounds like Venom 2, the movie. Like
I
I'm like,
haven't seen it.
oh, you haven't.
No,
Maybe
but you
that's
can
why
I'm cool with spoilers, honestly.
maybe that's why you feel joy in your life. You haven't seen that movie. Okay. Now I honestly did not like it. Look, no offense to anybody involved in it or whatever, but it did not float my boat. And apparently they were just being accurate to the comic book because you're like violence for the sake of violence without a lot of substance. I thought they nailed Venom and Spider-Man the animated series perfectly. But he was only in like one episode. Oh, he was in like 2 episodes. But when it comes to a character like that it's kind of a reaction to Peter and his life. It must be hard to make like that solo adventure. Because the more I think about it right now, why I thought Venom and Carnage were so cool is how they looked. And in the 90s, half of Marvel's thought process was, don't these look cool? And it wasn't about the writing, and the writing really took a backseat. But then later in the 90s and the early 2000s, all of a sudden you had the fucking awesome writing and the awesome story and the awesome art.
Ultimate
And
Spider-Man.
then they made some great fucking stuff. Like Spider-Man in the early 2000s is awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really awesome.
And you got cartoons that were produced by not Disney, but Warner Brothers, DC Comics, writing Spider-Man. That's nuts. But Spectacular Spider-Man was, for me, the pinnacle of Spider-Man technologies. Honestly, Venom, all like even like the Sandman and the Rhino, all these characters introduced like 5 or 6 episodes or more before they even turn into what they turn into. So they do all this character development with them, where like you've literally seen them in the first episodes. And if you don't know who Flint Marko is, you don't know he's the Sandman. So you're just watching this, and then at one point he turns into it. Like even Parker from like the first season to the second season of that show, he literally leaves school, grows up, and you're just like, he goes out with other people like Liz Allen, like he's not just into one person. Meanwhile, meets Black Cat, flirts with her. Like it's written so well, that Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, and I've never seen Spider-Man done so well since. And I think it's hilarious that it's by Warner Brothers. You know, like I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's nuts.
I love Spider-Man the animated series, and I just rewatched it. And I was telling everybody who's watching this or will watch this, that is coming soon, and I'm having a hard time figuring out how to put it out because it's 2 hours long without any edits and out any clips. So I'm thinking is on my other show, Yumi and YTV will be part 1 and pull a Kevin Smith and Chris Jericho and then put on this channel part 2. So you have to kind of acknowledge both pages' existence. Like, finally,
man.
because
You're
I have a
making your
lot
own
of
cinematic universe here.
there you go. But given that, the head writer had mentioned people keep telling him about Spectacular Spider-Man as being the other great Spider-Man show, and he's never seen it, but he might give it a try one of these days. Keep in mind, he wrote it for 5 years aggressively, like it was him against the world type situation sometimes. So he was a little burned out on the character, but it's so cool to hear you say how much you respond to the Spectacular Spider-Man, because I think it is a fucking phenomenal show. I was laughing so hard. The fight scenes were better than the movies at the time. It was fucking nuts. And
And
then
that Tombstone fight at I think it's near the end of season 2, and there's like an
Yeah.
opera playing in the background, and Spidey's fighting Tombstone, and there's another guy there. I'm blanking on who it is, and it was so nuts.
Benoit's watching. Benoit's one of the best dudes I've ever met in my
Oh
life.
man,
He's fucking Benoit rules, and he's like the size of a wrestler with the heart of a gentle lion. Benoit rules. Yeah, the Spectacular Spider-Man unfortunately gets canceled at the end of season 2 on a cliffhanger when shit gets real. Peter and Gwen finally get together, or they're about to, and then Harry kind of pulls the I'm sad card and keeps them away, but Harry knows what's up. Harry's turning into a bastard. And you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what happens. And you find out it's canceled because Disney and Sony start doing their thing, and then
and
Disney
the beginning
want to
was
make
hard.
yeah, and it's the beginning of the end of great Spider-Man cartoons, because all those other Spider-Man cartoons can fuck off. I love you guys. Whoever you're the creative types, it's all good. Everyone's cartoon is for somebody else. But for my personal interest, I gotta say, when all of a sudden Spider-Man has like 5 friends and a motorcycle and all that stuff, it screams that Batman and Robin shit when things just happen to sell action figures, and those other 2 series couldn't give a fuck about their stories, couldn't give a fuck about just selling action figures.
Well, for real, man, like they cut Parker out completely because they're like, kids don't want emotional baggage. They don't want to see if Parker's going to hook up with this girl. They don't want to see his first kiss. They don't want to see any emotional stuff. They want to see kicks and punches by multiple different people. If we could just have 1 million people throwing kicks and punches and explosions all day, and new vehicles and things we can turn into toys for those kids, like, it's because when you start writing down to children, that's when you start losing your audience. Because the thing is kids grow up and they rewatch this stuff, and if it's good, they're going to show their kids and their kids and their kids. I'll never forget that first Disney episode where at one point Spidey is whipping out Family Guy jokes that like will be like, remember that time I wore a sombrero? And then I showed him with a sombrero and he does this little Olay thing. I just turned it off and I was like, sorry, I can't. Oh man.
Yeah, I came here for theater, not a fucking puppet show. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I almost I would compare Spectacular Spider-Man to like Batman the Animated Series. Like it had the same thought process. You're gonna write Heart of Ice. It's gonna be Mr. Freeze. All these emotions. Little kids aren't always gonna pick up on that, but some of them do, and their parents do. And as they go older, this is like it's gonna be with them forever. They'll never forget it. Like it's literally one of the main reasons I write my comic, and my comic is mostly all about like love and acceptance and all sorts of like messed up things that happen at school. Like it's all emotional. There's a lot of times when I was writing it that I'm like, oh man, should I just go the Dragon Ball route and have all these kids fighting and doing competitions? And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. For me, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I want to show off. If you want to watch Dragon Ball, you can watch Dragon Ball. It's just fighting all day, every day. The emotional spectrum that you get from Dragon Ball's epic too. Sometimes it's just that I want to have something that has more heart and more depth, like specifically Batman's Heart of Ice or Spectacular Spider-Man. Like I love that.
Something about, when I think of X-Men the animated series and like Morph dying in that first episode, like all of a sudden as a viewer, and I said this to John the other day when we were talking about Spider-Man as well, but I've interviewed on my YTV channel the showrunner of X-Men the animated series and had a long conversation about him trying to figure out the tone and how even Stan Lee was giving him pushback about what the show should be. And both showrunners of both shows had the same fucking problem where Stan Lee was trying to come in and kind of like say, no, this is the way it is. But Stan didn't have that grasp that concept of what would make a great deep 90s cartoon in his mind. A comic book panel, you could say a thought bubble that's deep and then move on very quickly. But in a cinematic sense, that thought bubble needs to resonate. And it's a different medium sometimes. And sometimes you could be the godfather of a medium and then an ignoramus in another one. And it's interesting how that happens.
Like X-Men, man, I really refer more to Chris Claremont over Stan Lee. Like Stan Lee wrote the first one, invented the first main characters, and then Claremont took it over for 600 issues after that, something ridiculous, a really, really long time. And so that whole 90s cartoon, man, they just took the comic book pages and they edited out a few things here and there, but it's like a person who grew up on that cartoon could have a decent discussion with somebody that's only read the comics, and the cartoon person never read them at that time. Like the Jim Lee run, it's really it was awesome for real. It was cool. People complain it's not enough like the comic books. And then you watch that cartoon and it's just they gave it to us back then, man. It was great.
It's fucking crazy about the first X-Men movie. You ever play I don't play it, but have you ever heard of the game Metal Gear Solid?
Yes, but I haven't played it either.
Okay. Have you ever seen the movie Guyver 2?
Okay. Oh, I don't. Hold on. Now, are we talking about the Guyver animated OVA, or are we talking about actually with Mark Hamill Guyver #1 and then live action Power Rangers style?
Yeah, live action Power Ranger style, but I love the anime. Fucking love it.
Yeah.
I've seen the bio boosted armor. I've seen the original actually this year. Fucking cool too.
The remake was super good to that anime. They made a second one in 2000s.
Bio boosted armor. Yeah.
I loved all of it. That was cool, man.
Yeah. So in Guyver 2, there's this guy who plays the Guyver, and going from the nerdy guy in the first one, even though Mark Hamill's on the poster, Mark Hamill plays a cop who gets turned into a crab, a crab monster. In the second one, it's this guy, a really cool guy. His name's David Ader, and he is also the voice of Snake from Metal Gear Solid. He was a writer on X-Men, on the first X-Men movie, but he was the only writer and guy there. He was rewriting that gave a fuck about the comic book. And you have to understand, back in the day, they were making Batman movies for the sake of selling toys. People did not know how to make fucking comic book movies in the 90s, with the exception of Blade. That they did not know how to do it.
The Crow wasn't so bad.
The Crow, that's not the same thing though. That's an independent production that went against the grain so much that their lead actor died. But that's the early 90s. I'm talking about post Batman and Robin. Everybody was just in the mid 90s, things got dumb and they needed to get undumb. And besides Blade, of course. But they didn't even market Blade as a superhero movie. They're like, here's an awesome black vampire who kills other vampires. That's it.
True.
No Marvel overlay. No, hey, check out this comic book. It was almost like it was apologizing. Same thing with The Crow. They didn't present it look at this comic book movie.
Man, they want the bros to fill those seats. Back then, if you were it's a comic book thing, they'd be like,
no, bro, comic book,
I beat up a kid that would read that book. So if you don't market that, you're just look at this black guy killing vampires. You're like, oh, that's sick.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So he was on the set and he was arguing with people every day. Oh, let's just do this. And he's like, no, you can't do that. Wolverine wouldn't do that. And he got the job actually because they were trying to figure out something of how to say the X-Men in X-Men because they thought it was too stupid to say out loud. They're like, oh, we can't say, oh, we're the X-Men. That's too corny. And so he figured out something where Cyclops is trying to talk to Logan and get him on the team. And he is like saying, come on, Logan, like you'd be a good asset to this team. And because Xavier has kind of an ego and there's X's everywhere, for Xavier, he's like, listen, I don't need you. You can tell Charles and all his little X-Men here that I don't fucking need them. And then, takes his claws. They were playing basketball, pops the basketball, walks away. And that's how he actually got the job. Even though the scene didn't make it in, that's how he got around the problem of saying X-Men. Now, that just goes to show Fox and everybody else's mentality about being proud of the work. Because after X-Men, Spider-Man comes, and all of a sudden, comic books became fucking cool again. But prior to that,
Yeah.
if everyone's like, hey, X-Men, you're barely like the comic book. Without David Ayer, it would have been way fucking more off. Trust me. And those little heroes that I wish I could go up to them someday and say, thanks, man. I think you turned the tide. Because if X-Men wasn't cool and even semi-accurate, and Bryan Singer has also credited X-Men the animated series as well, but given the fact that Pride of the X-Men, the pilot before X-Men the animated series, had Wolverine with an Australian accent, I'm really glad that Bryan Singer put the right DVD in, because he could have been like, hey, you, turns out you could be Australian, go for it. That would have been bad.
It would have been rough, especially since, the X-Men movies were very heavily American eccentric, I would have loved to, like, when you see Colossus, he's American, like everyone's American, except for Wolverine, who mentions he's Canadian. Everybody else is American in that. And I always loved in the comics and even in that cartoon, how it was like the mutant issue is happening all over the planet, like that's part of what makes it so appealing. Like everybody can feel like they're a part of it because they are. And so when I watched those films, I remember being a little sad about that. That's another thing I loved about Deadpool, is it's so Canadian, which is great.
Dude, that was Deadpool, that movie. Had they not leaked that fucking test footage, would have never happened. Deadpool would have been in Wolverine Origins without a mouth, and they would have called it a day. Can you believe it was Christmas Eve when I watched that test footage for the first time, and just being like, oh my God, this is the most perfectly accurate comic book thing I've ever fucking seen. And it's in this. I mean, this is a $1 billion franchise. Like, how the fuck aren't they making this? And I remember distinctly, like, walking out of Wolverine Origins feeling dead inside, just being like, because I wasn't even familiar with Deadpool, dude. It was Hulk versus Wolverine where I really realized the greatness that Deadpool is. And I think Nolan North voiced him. So, it's fucking crazy. Like, we almost didn't get Deadpool. And if someone didn't have the balls to be like, break the rules.
That Wolverine Origins, that wasn't Wolverine Origins, that was Weapon X. They should have just called it Weapon X. Like, the Origins part is literally the intro credits. I remember the intro credits go by and they're showing all the scenes of Wolverine and his origins, and I'm just like, oh boy, I feel like they're really glazing through this. Are they gonna like flashback and show him growing up as a kid? Like, are we gonna see like him living on the farm? Like, where are they going with this? Nope, Weapon X. And I was just like, why would they like skip all that? That's literally like a child growing up that we know because we watched like 10 movies about him before this. Well, no, at that point, 3. But it's just like, what? I was so excited for that, for real, especially since the origin comic was really good. They literally could have just like almost frame for framed it and it would have turned out amazing. People would have loved that.
I don't understand why they didn't spend like 20 minutes in World War II of just like, how would Wolverine handle this Wonder Woman type of like battle scene, where machine guns are everywhere. Here's this guy that can keep healing himself. So he keeps, let's say he runs, falls down. Like, literally, they would run out of bullets and get tired before, I just would love to see that strategy. Or,
they took Wolvie killing Nazis away from us.
Oh my God. Wolverine kills Nazis. Just that
Yeah.
title would sell 1,000,000 copies. Wolverine kills Nazis.
And he even
Marvel,
runs
do
into
that.
Captain. Like, it would have
Yeah.
been cool to have Captain America there as like a. I know back then they couldn't really maybe do all
Yeah.
of that, but I'm sure they could have done like, like he'd be there, but they hide certain things, so it's him, but it's not him, but it is him.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
get away with it. But yeah, man, like his whole origin is awesome. So it's a shame that we didn't really get a film about that yet.
Speaking of Wolverine, let's dip back into the 90s, like we're
Yeah.
like the namesake of this show. Man, I love Cal Dodd's voice. I love Cal Dodd's Wolverine. I think every Wolverine has kind of mimicked him since then. But there's another great Wolverine show called Wolverine and the X-Men that I think needs more love. It was only one season, but it was fucking brilliant. And that reminds me of the Spectacular Spider-Man, that later great show that really should get more love. But in a comic books, in a video game sense, was there ever a particular X-Men video game that you fucking loved? Because I can think of one, but it wasn't on a home console. Oh, Mutant Apocalypse is super cool, but I've talked too much. You tell me about Mutant Apocalypse and your playing of that. Did you get that one?
It's a Capcom game, man. It's basically like if you took Street Fighter and then you made it a side-scrolling video game. It was hard as hell, which made no sense how hard it was. Like that game, man, it was a tough as nails game, but like for real, it was great. Great game. I loved. Psylocke was in it. Like you had all these cool characters, and all the combos are Street Fighter combos too. So you'd be shooting Shoryukens and Hadokens left and right. That game was sweet, man. Obviously the arcade one was so sick it doesn't make any sense.
With the 6 players? Oh,
yeah.
Dude, I used to go all the way to Lerone just to play that game. I'm not even kidding. I had a season pass. This is when emulators weren't a thing. And I used to go all the way to Lerone and just play that game myself. And I always played Wolverine. Every time I played someone else, when a friend wanted to be Wolverine, I couldn't stand it. I don't know. I just would walk around with my fingers out when I was a kid, just pretending I had claws. Fucking
I was
amazing.
a Cyclops guy.
Really?
I know. Now everybody's running away.
No,
I lost all my followers.
Now we can play together and we'll never be pissed. So we got to find a Nightcrawler guy and we got to find a Dazzler person. That's pretty fucking rad.
I always grew up loving Cyclops quite a bit. Like his mentality, like out of the Turtles, my favorite one was Leo, and Cyclops and Leo are both very similar. They're both
you like leaders.
Yeah, and ones that have like a strong code of ethics, hardcore values that they follow, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not like their self-righteousness. It's more like a righteousness based off of like the concept of self-righteousness, right? Like when you see like Superman make his big speeches about what's good in the world, like I looked at that as a kid and was like, yeah, I gotta be like that. And like Cyclops checked a lot of those boxes, like not so much later in the years, but he kind of goes over the rails in the late 2000s. But early on, like young Cyclops, man, I always thought it was interesting because reading the comics back then, you'd have like Magneto that was for mutant superiority. You'd have Xavier that was for acceptance, not equality. I have to mention this. Like in multiple comics, Xavier's rarely against equality. He's just like, you have to accept that we live with you. And Cyclops was about equality. He's like, they're living creatures and they're intelligent. And a lot of them might not be able to shoot lasers out of their eyes, but they have done incredible things. And so I always love Cyclops for this. And it's the main reason he would always butt heads with somebody like Xavier. But like when people think Cyclops, all they think is Jean. Jean. Man, I was glad when he dumped her and just hooked up with Emma, honestly. Like that girl is so wishy-washy. And I love Jean. I love all the over-emotional characters. It's just Emma Frost.
Yo,
she was awesome.
If you look at Cyclops's girlfriend guest list, it is fucking baffling. He's been with Psylocke. Yeah, he's been with Psylocke. He's been with all the like Wolverine was like a hairy outsider who was obsessed with redheads, but Scott Summers was the true Mac Daddy of the X-Men. And
we hooked up with a lot of mentally people that had like mental abilities. And I think I remember reading in a comic where they like the way his brain works. Because like I said, he's very structured. And I think it's Emma Frost at one point that says that he has a very structured mind, and most telepaths like that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Marvel.
It's interesting you say I find myself in life becoming a Leonardo and Cyclops person, despite the fact I want to be the cool badass or whatever. But it's not by design. It's what happens. It's just like, yeah,
Mhm.
let's follow, let's do this. All right, cool. And then people are like, nah, man, I want to be cool, and I'm like, yeah, but we got the stuff to do. Whether if it's
Yeah.
being in a band or doing our things.
Well, the
Anyway,
Raphaels and Wolverines of the world usually get people hurt. I mean, like we were talking about Wolverine's girlfriends. Let's go through that same list next to Cyclops and let's look at all the ones that Wolverine's been with that are alive, shall we?
dude, my friend David Harris and you would get along so well. He works at a Comic Cons. He loves Cyclops so much. And so does my friend Oz, who runs a group called Comic Book Nerds Are Hot. Like, there are a lot of Cyclops fans out there. You should all find each other.
Actually, my favorite character is Rogue. Like of almost
Really?
all Marvel of all time, I love Rogue, and like obviously '90s Rogue, but like
Yeah.
even like what is it, '60s Rogue, all the way up. Like I love. She just has so much character development, so much evolution. I love like her whole thing where she can't touch people and what she has to go through with that. Like her relationship with Remy. Like I'm a huge romantic comedy kind of person, man. Like a lot of my manga surrounds around a lot of emotional things like that. And so, growing up, I really gravitate towards those kind of situations. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love Rogue.
Okay, well, interesting you say you love Rogue. So after the movie comes out, there's this cartoon called X-Men Evolution. Now, as an X-Men the animated series fan and purist, at first I was just like, the fuck is this? But over the years I've really gone to appreciate, the style of it, the almost anime influence in it sometimes, and the characterizations. It was pretty cool to go from an ultra Louisiana super powered Captain Marvel's power level Rogue to a goth girl in high school. Now, I
Yeah.
thought the X-Men Evolution Rogue was pretty interesting. If you're gonna make another X-Men show right after this other one, at least they were different. Do you have a preferred Rogue out of the two of those?
Well, I thought the X Men Evolution Rogue. So I didn't watch a lot of Evolution. I probably watched maybe like 12 or 13 episodes, but it's on my list. I'm gonna plow
That's a
through it.
lot of
Right?
episodes, to be frank. Though, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's very
Come on,
sporadic too. It wasn't like all back to back.
yeah.
But I watched a bunch of random episodes. The thing is that Louisiana Rogue, she brought a lot of great messages, and you get a lot of good messages with the newer Rogue too, because the newer Rogue feels more down to earth, and most other humans watching the show can relate to certain situations she goes through.
Mm.
Whereas the Louisiana one, it's not the same. It's like it's harder for you to put yourself in her shoes because of all the power she has. And unlike in the films where Rogue decides, give me that treatment, I want to get rid of my powers, in the cartoon and in the comics, when she has the option, she says, no, this is who I am. And I need to accept who I am, because taking something and doing something like that to change isn't necessarily going to make me happy, and I need to love myself. So you
Mm.
get that from that Louisiana Rogue. Plus, I have this thing for strong women, man. Like I love
Me too.
Ripley I love Sarah Connor. If you watch Princess Mononoke, San, like all these characters in these animes and these shows, like I like it when you have girls that are strong and independent like that. And the
Mm.
one from Evolution but at the same time, she was a lot more guarded and emotionally vulnerable.
Mm.
And I don't mind that. It's just a different written character. It's just that, let's just say I preferred her over the ones from the films. I wasn't a fan of the film. She was just kind of like I don't know, like
She was Kitty Pryde with a different name.
yeah, only Kitty
Yeah.
Pryde was more useful.
Well, Kitty Pryde in the comic books and in Pride of the X-Men, though, well, actually, no. What's funny is that the first issue of X-Men ever is the same thing of every time the X-Men do anything, it's young girl discovers powers, comes to the mansion, discovers everything. It's her hero's journey in a sense. But then
Yeah, man.
they quickly put her in the back. So the first issue of X-Men ever is Jean showing up to the mansion and having to, absorb. Oh, here's the danger room. Here's everybody else. Here's all that. So that's the first issue of X-Men. And prior to the X-Men, same thing. Kitty shows up. Oh my God, look at all these mutants. Holy shit. In the animated series, it's Jubilee showing up at the mansion. Holy shit, look at all these mutants. And then in the films, it's Rogue being like, I'm new here. Oh my God, here's the mansion. Here's all the mutants. It's always that route. but you know, I wish they would more Luke Skywalker these characters, you know, and stick with it, you know,
Oh,
not just be
Wolverine
like,
and the X-Men.
yeah, there you go.
That show was awesome. They were just like, okay, we're not going to do crazy introductions. Here's the
Yeah,
beginning of the show.
yeah.
Jean Grey does her thing. Now she's missing. What's happening? Oh, and Charles is missing too, apparently. So it's like, what's going on? And that was great. Great. That was a great show. But I guess I definitely prefer the Louisiana one, man. Like, I don't even remember if she's from Louisiana in Evolution, but giving her that accent, and again, it kind of goes with world building. Like, X-Men feels more global when you have characters that have different accents and that come from different parts of the world. And it's intriguing to see that.
Yeah, I agree too. And like, let's face it, when did the X-Men become a hit? They put the X-Men out. The X-Men were not popular in the 60s. They were fucking not. And then when our people were starting to draw them in the like late 60s, early 70s, nobody really gave a shit either. But as soon as Len Wein and Chris Claremont like started to do their thing, and all of a sudden you had that giant size X-Men issue, and all of a sudden the X-Men were global. They got someone from Japan, someone from Russia, someone from Africa, and you know, they made the team instead of like instead of 5 white kids from New York, it was just all of a sudden these are these world warriors with accents, cultures, and they didn't get along, but they had to be a team. And all of a sudden, X-Men shot into the stratosphere of being one of the biggest comic books in the fucking world. And it's because they had diversity in there like 40 fucking years ago.
Yeah,
You
man.
know what I mean? Yeah.
And
So
also, you got to think when X-Men first came out, you had little kids reading comics, and those kids were kind of getting older. So at one point, it wasn't so popular in the past, but the few that were reading it were following it along. And X-Men was really teenage angst, like even from the beginning. And so when those little kids get older and they become teens themselves, they're like, oh man, I can relate with these teenagers. And it wasn't just X-Men that went through that exact same thing. It was Teen Titans. I mean, the Teen Titans comic was like, eh. And then all of a sudden, it started getting popular around the same time as X-Men because it's the same kind of things. It's about these teenagers going through all this stuff, these problems in their lives, and the people reading the comics were becoming teenagers, and they're like, I can relate to this.
yeah. One of my bosses, he loved the Teen Titans and loved the X-Men, and one of his pride and joys was the crossover issue that they did. But he's like, no one was cooler than the Teen Titans back in the day and the X-Men. And it's true. I sometimes forget that X-Men were a teenage team because animated series, X-Men the animated series, they all were in their 20s and they had been X-Men for a while.
And for those that weren't, they looked like they were. They're like, I'm just a 14-year-old boy.
Exactly. Everybody was cut in the 90s, but that's because of toys. Like literally, Abby in X-Men in Spider-Man the animated series, the reason why, and whoever subscribes to this channel will eventually see this for themselves. But John Semper was telling me that the reason why they're all jacked is because Avi Arad was selling toys, and he wanted them to look as much like the toy, and toys are all buff. He's like, I like it when they're buff, and so. That's why Peter Parker looks like he could bench press a truck. And originally Peter Parker was supposed to look much more like the comic books at the time, Peter Parker, and then seemingly overnight stand in like it, and they called him and called the artist in charge and made him change it. So it's funny.
But I'm actually a fan of that. I think it's cool because when you think like mutants, all right, depending on their abilities or whatever, these people are training every single day to survive, especially the X-Men. They should all be in crazy shape. Like, unless, you've got characters that for some reason their mutant ability negates this. Like if Cyclops isn't in peak performance, he's going to die out there. Like he's flipping, jumping. He doesn't have a healing factor. Like every time he goes out, lives are on the line, including his own. And so I kind of like that, especially when you're thinking they're mutants. They're the evolution of humans. So if like that includes brain power, that includes your body, that includes your immune system, like everything you're going to have needs to be that extra step up. And even the comics, they'll be like, oh, they have mutant strength. Well, everyone has mutant strength when they're a mutant. So Cyclops is a little stronger than a human that would have the same cut and build because of that mutant strength. And I think that's okay. Like, I like that. I think that conceptually it works with the universe that they've created. I mean, even Spider-Man, he gets bit by the spider, gets all the powers and the abilities, like in the Tobey Maguire one, where he's like, he's not all big. And then when he gets bitten, he's like, hey, look at me in the mirror. I like that. I think I'm like, yes, that, like you're going to become like a peak of human evolution. Like that's what you're going towards with whatever mutagenic that hits you. Again, unless the powers contradict it in some way, like someone like the Blob. Or another good example is like Magneto. I mean, the guy's like 60 years old, and like for real, his forearm is the size of my whole body. So it's just like he's massive, a mountain of muscle, and he's so old that you're like, well, there's no way. I mean, there's some old people like that, but I doubt Magneto bench presses all day long. But then sometimes you find, like in certain comics, I'm sure he does. Honestly, I haven't read every X-Men comic, but I bet they would put it in there that he's got a reason for being in good shape. And a lot of mutants, it's just because they're like the way that their body works is just so that they become in better shape. They're a better human, physically, let's say, like genome-wise.
That's a good justification for it. All right, we got some comments here. What's going on, everybody? Hey, Danny, how's it going? Ben was asking, as adults, do you all have the same TMNT, or did it change over time? Ben, you're gonna have to specify that a little bit more, because there is so much TMNT in my heart and my soul that and it's probably pertaining to something earlier, in which the context makes a lot more sense. But I will say this is that I've loved Ninja Turtles my whole life. But my favorite Ninja Turtle anything besides those IDW comic books is the first movie, and that 1990 movie. I like my Ninja Turtles like I like my Spiderman and X-Men cartoons. I like it when the creatives that are making children content, possibly for children, have trust in the children to process real world danger that your heroes can go through. And that first TMNT movie is fucking astounding. Like how well it has aged and how well I watch it now and feel just as much, if not more, for Splinter's aspect of this. I'm like, oh my God, my teenage sons are getting the shit kicked out of them by runaways pretending to be in essentially Japanese warrior like cosplay, because this psycho from Japan is manipulating all of them into running away from home and living their life through violence for his, for his benefit, So I'm like, that's crazy. I wish the Ninja Turtle movies would, like, as cool and big and Shrek as they all look. I'm like, could they not at least just bring that level of danger to it?
Well, to add to that too, it was all the little details that really sold that film. I mean, you watched, like, let's say the newer ones, they're whipping out swords and sais and staffs. They look new. Like the swords are literally like shiny and new. If you rewatch the first Turtles movie, the sais are dirty, old. And I think there's duct tape on the handle, the Leonardo sword. Like they look like they got these weapons. They've been using them for a while, and they keep patching them up with what they're finding in the sewers. Like, that's amazing. Raph loses a sai. It's a big deal. He can't just get another sai at the local sai shop. They're not as easy to find, especially back in the 90s. Like, everybody wasn't doing martial arts back then, especially involving, like, for sure there was, but I'm just saying, like, especially like sai training in particular, you need to find a dojo that has that. Like, for real, there's a whole thing about that. So that's why it's like all those little details really make that film above and beyond. Like, I read the first issue to the Ninja Turtles comic, like, way before any child should. Like, my one of my parents was a flight attendant when I was younger and scored me like the first issue of the Turtles, and I had read it. And for real, I would tell my friends at school, I'm like, no, man, I swear they kill tons of people in it, and they all have red bandanas. And they're like, you fool, you know nothing about the Turtles. Then I bring the comic to school, immediately taken away from me, because where it says Turtles, you've got the sword with blood on it. So I kind of grew up with that, and I love that. And when they came out with the movie was like the perfect blend between that and that terrible cartoon show. Like, don't get me wrong, that 80s cartoon show, the first few episodes are really cool, but it really dipped. And animation quality, voice acting, and I love the voice actors to that show, but it's just that wrong voices on wrong characters. They didn't care when they were making it. But when they made the movie, oh man, they put some love into that film. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I compare that, like, okay, the greatest comic book movies ever made are not even Marvel and DC ones. Like, let's face it. Like, the greatest comic books movies ever made were these independent productions that were under the radar. You didn't even consider them comic book movies. But that first Ninja Turtles movie, I mean, Eastman and Liard were, like, part of that production. And then when part 2 comes out, like, clearly they're not involved in it anymore, and it just takes like a
Neither's Jim Henson.
yeah, that silly twist. So I love that first one, but when we're talking about the greatest comic book movies ever made, I mean, I put in a triple feature movie night. I want to ask you what you think the third one would be, but you got the first Ninja Turtle movies, you got the Crow, fucking awesome, almost page accurate shit. What would the third one be? I mean,
I got it. I got it right now. And for all of you listening and watching this, if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor, watch it, and try and support it any way you can. Dread, Carl Urban.
Yeah.
For real, like, it's not exactly like the comic book.
No.
But the spirit and the soul are there 110%. Carl Urban, all you see of his face, the whole film, is the back of his head when he puts the helmet on, and the rest of the movie he wears the helmet. I know it's a small detail to say that, but Dredd doesn't take his helmet off every 2 seconds to be like, look how pretty I am. I'm Carl Urban. Like, oh my God, he is perfect. The whole story is perfect. Like, everything fits in the Dredd universe, and it's visually incredible. And like, you're going to hate Dredd because he's so like, well, kind of like Cyclops, but like Leonardo, but to the extreme, like follows the law 100%. If you don't follow it, he's going to kill you because that's how it works. But he warns you multiple times. Well, that's it. Let's say like the amount of times he's supposed to. But it's just to say that like that film is, for me, like I put it on the same level as Turtles and The Crow and those films because it's just like, it's so accurate. It's so accurate to what would have been if they turn into a comic, man. Like, for real, like every time I think of that, I must have seen that movie, like, no joke, 8 times. For real, like sometimes I'm just drawing and I'm just playing it in the background.
Oh, by the way, Jake Gunn, one of the coolest human beings I know.
I'm loving his profile pic.
Yeah, he's like, but Jake is a huge Guyver fan, and me and him have dorked out about I don't know, dude, if you haven't seen the second live action movie, like first one, I've
seen every Guyver thing ever.
Okay, so it's really funny.
I've even read the manga.
There you go. Oh, I love Guyver. I wanted my Power Rangers to have blood in it, and it was the perfect answer to it. And I watched it when I was way too young, and I shouldn't have seen it. But have you ever seen Psycho Gorman?
So I actually, I recently just got it, but I haven't watched it yet. Because my wife was like, usually, like, she likes watching documentaries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she'll watch some of the stuff I watch too. But when I mention this, she doesn't like things that are overly gory for the sake of being gory.
Oh, shit. She's not a fan. Don't watch it with her. Don't watch it with her.
However,
it's fucked up, dude.
I know. Thing. But it's not like, it's not going to be like Saw fucked up where they're like mentally trying to get in your head as they make the gore. Like, it's kind of like almost campy, and there's going to be gore and tons of stuff, but because there's some jokes behind it and it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think she might be okay with it. Worst case scenario will be like 10 minutes, and then she's going to be like, that's it, I'm out of here. And she'll leave, and then I'll finish it another day. But I really want to see that for real. It really makes me think of the Guyver quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. Oh, well, I interviewed on this very channel the director of Psycho Gorman, and he even brought up, like, half our interview is us talking about Guyver 2, and another half is us talking about the Monster Squad. And he even adds the stunt coordinator in that film was even such a Guyver fan, they added the Guyver kick in it in one of their fight scenes, which is the flip over, kind of do a fake out where you think you're going to miss, but then your foot nails them in the face as you're about to go down. And I'm like, that's my favorite thing in the world to do is talk about Guyver with people. I realize, like, nothing brings me more joy. Like, people could give me candy and riches. I'm like, yes, that's great, but could we talk about Guyver too? And
man,
because it's that thing that you can walk into a room and you can show your signal, and half the people will be like, "The fuck are you talking about?" But then the person that does turn their head, you're just like, we are going to be friends. So anyway, when it comes to Guyver, Jake and I joke the fuck out about, he has a Guyver toy too. His where did you get your Guyver toy from? Because
it's Guyver Unit 2, but it's the version from the OAV, so it's like not the regular anime. It was like a kind of like a short movie, and so it's actually a girl version of her, and she's in purple. Purple's my favorite color of all time. Growing up loving the Decepticons, and I just think it's a dope color. So when I had the chance to get one of these Guyver figures, it's a Figma. And I remember when she had come out, it sold out immediately, couldn't find it anywhere. But there's a Japanese website called Mandarake, which sells a lot of used things. And Japanese, oh my gosh, they're so fun when it comes to used stuff because they'll have it new in box with an ever so slight dent in the corner. And they'll be like, oh, 50% off this garbage. Because them, it needs to be perfect if it's in perfect condition. So I managed to score it back in the day, and still for like a decent price. It was kind of expensive regardless, but it's the Guyver. It's like the only Guyver thing I own. I used to have like a Unit 2, but like Lisker Unit 2, like from the old cartoon, which was like he's kind of like I guess like a greenish color. And it was a big statue I'd made. And I remember at one point, like I had a party at my house, and it was like a glue model. And I had a friend that saw it. He's like, "What? This is cool!" And he was drunk, and he grabbed it, and it just turned to dust, man. Like it came apart into tons of little pieces, blew up all over the place. And I was like, and he was like freaking out. He's like, "Oh my God, what did I do? What did I do?" And I'm like, well, that's all right. A little part of me died that day. Now I'm extra careful when I show stuff to people. Actually, I'm really not. I'm terrible. I'm like, "You want to see this? It's cool. Hold it. Look how cool it is." I still do that today.
Yeah, lick it, dude. Brent, I have a funny story to tell you about a trip to Japan I did with my band, The Real Deal, at one point. But I want you to answer this question. As a fellow creative, do you have any advice on how to channel nostalgia into your work? And Brandon is asking that.
Oh man. So it kind of just happens. Honestly, it happens naturally. Like if you're a big fan, because I write and I illustrate. So I don't know if you're talking about writing or the drawing part, but when it comes to writing, I write what I love. And I love slice of life. I love things that are hugely emotional and dramatic. And I love a continuing storyline. It's like it's weird that I would say that because I said I love slice of life, and that's rare that it has like an ongoing story. But I try to mix everything in it. So that's kind of not so much nostalgic. But I grew up loving Batman the Animated Series. I literally watched a ton of Sailor Moon because it had episodes that followed.
I love Sailor Moon,
yeah, I'm literally drinking out of like a Sailor Moon bottle right now. But nice. So it's just like when it comes to writing, I kind of mesh in a bit of what I learned over the years and what I like about different types of writers to be able to come up with what I have. When it comes to drawing, all my colors are super saturated in my illustrations, like the drawing you see behind me. I try to make things really bright so it feels kind of like an anime. And I really love like 90s style comics too. So, I mean, even like my hair, a lot of my characters, really big hair and very big personalities and things like that. It kind of just bleeds in, honestly. Like if you're nostalgic about things and you start writing or drawing, like I said, if you love something, it's going to be in there. The only way that you could really actively do it is if you find an artist or a writer in particular that you really love and you're like, oh man, I want to put more of this in my thing. So then you would just study that artist or writer and maybe put a few hints or cues of their style into your own so that it gives off more of what you used to love when you were a kid. Don't copy it, people. You just intertwine it with what you're doing.
I find I've done that in life by accident sometimes. We're just kind of like, especially when you don't think about it too much, you're just like, oh yeah, well I like this. Like if you like, if you like Sailor Moon and Batman the Animated Series, Blithe makes a lot of sense. And I'm really glad you like Sailor Moon because so did I. And what's funny is like, back in the 90s, we're the same age actually. I'm 38 in a month. And life's been good to us. Our genes are pretty good, I see. Like we have not spent a lot of time.
Still look like children. I still get carded when I want to get a beer.
yeah. Well, I don't get carded anymore, but every time
you got long hair, it helps.
That's the thing. That's why I'm keeping it long. Because when I tie my hair back, and I'm like, who is this old man in my mirror staring at me? Dude, I forgot to say. Okay, so quickly, my band was on tour in Japan, and everywhere I went. This is the funny thing about Japan as a culture when it comes to nostalgia. Like if it's super old, hundreds of years old, awesome. But the way we look at the 80s and 70s and 90s and we're like, hey, remember the 90s and 80s? They're not interested in that. They make something new, they put it out, and then it's gone. And they're like, okay, great, let's make new stuff. but we will hold on to something. If something's a hit, we're like, yeah, but remember the 80s? And everywhere I went in Japan, they're like, I'm like, dude, where's all the Dragon Ball stuff? And my buddy Aki's like, well, I don't know, isn't that old? And I'm like, isn't that old? That's my whole MO. I have a show called You, Me, and YTV where it should be called, hey, remember the Canadian 90s? And it's and eventually I've in Tokyo on a day off, there was this place called Akihabara, which is the place, the Electric City, where all the shit we love is sold. And I could only go there for 45 minutes on that tour. Like
that's not long enough.
I was in 10 Japanese cities looking for anything remotely Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, all the stuff that a poser like me would know, and couldn't see anything. And I go to this Akihabara place, almost fell to my knees. It was so fucking beautiful. Like, I'm like, oh my God. 8 years later, my dad's going there because he's a martial artist. And he's going there in the Philippines, and he says, why not as a family we all go? And I'm like, yes, let's go to Akihabara. He's like, what? I'm like, never mind. You'll see. So we go there again, and on that trip, I go there 4 times. I spend hours there. My dad's a gem. He came, hang out with me, watched me look at things. And it's funny, I found the same mall I did 8 years ago. That's in this back or alley, but it's like 9 floors of all this stuff that all of us watching this right now would have drooled over. And if I knew it was that hard to find Guyver stuff, I would have sought out Guyver stuff and just brought it home and just gave it to people, knowing the bullshit that you and Jake have gone through to get Guyver action figures. If only I knew. I still know a dude in Japan, and I'm going to ask him about that. I'm going to be like, bro, let's start not a business, but let's start a charity of some kind, because I know some good people that have been wronged by their attempt of having their love of action figures, and it costing them way too much.
Well, I'd love to touch on at the beginning of your amazing anecdote, because I really want to go to Akihabara. You mentioned you talked to your friend, you mentioned Dragon Ball. He's like, yo, that's old. Like, so clearly it was before Super had even come out.
Yeah.
So Japan's mentality on things is you make something, you write the whole thing, it comes to an end, and then you move on. It's very rare that there are things that don't do this, unless it's like children's shows where you're like, yeah, every single like day we need a new episode to keep these kids occupied, kind of like Dragon Ball and a lot of shonens and Sailor Moon and things like that. But there's a lot of amazing shows. It's just going to be 50 episodes. That's it. 20 episodes. That's it. Like Full Metal Alchemist,
they don't milk it. They don't milk it, with the exception of Dragon Ball, because they're going faster than the mangas could be written. Hence why. Same thing with Sailor Moon, actually. Yeah.
Well, a lot of them back in the day. But it's just that the mentality over there is incredible, especially for indie creators like myself. Like my whole life, like I said, I kind of did like manga, comics, like I kind of do half and half. These days I find myself going more manga, despite my storytelling always being Western, because I prefer the way a story is told in a Western comic over a manga. It's just manga. Usually in a panel, you'll have like a page, you'll have like 3 panels, 4 panels. It's rare that they go too much over that because the format's smaller. And it's always like big shots. And I prefer how in Western comics, they panel things in a way that subconsciously, without you even realizing it, your eye is going to go to the next panel, because the storyboarding is so well done for the artwork. The thing is that because they're always so used to new things in Japan, when you're making a new manga and you're making a new comic, so like if I'm hitting up like anime conventions, I'll always sell a lot more of my comic than I will at a comic convention. It's a lot harder to push it at a comic convention because at comic conventions, people just want that nostalgia. Like somebody will show up and they'll see that Carnage drawing at you and they'll be like, hook me up with that, bro. I love your artwork. And I'm like, if you love my artwork, you should read my book. And then I'll show them the book and everything. They're like, yeah, I just kind of want that Carnage. And I'm like, yeah, all right, man. I'm like, I know, I'm used to it. I got thick skin. I've been doing this for a while. And eventually, like, and you're selling your own stuff, man. You always have to push 10 times harder. You're doing the same grind with your show. So it's like, you're like, yeah, check this out. It's amazing. Check this out. It's amazing. And for real, I got to say that like 9 out of 10 people that have read my book have really liked it. It's just, you get, I can't possibly be 10 out of 10. That'd be impossible.
No,
Plus,
of course not.
People that will look at my Carnage and be like, that Carnage is dope. I'll buy your book. And again, it's kind of like, okay, I have to be like, hold up, bro. You're not going to read this and there's tons of violence and killing in it. You know, like there's not going to be tons of gore. There's some violence in it every now and then, but not that much. And it's mostly going to be people messing around. Like literally, like I have this issue right here, and the whole thing is my characters walking from the first class to the second class. You know, when you're like in school and you're walking to the first class, the second class with a bunch of your friends, you're dicking around, you're joking. One of my characters is looking for a bathroom and he doesn't know where he's going. And he's freaking out because it's like a new school. Like I put all of those kind of like emotional things that people go through in my book because I've experienced it more than enough, having multiple first days of school in my life. So it's just when you're trying to sell that to somebody, especially like somebody who's more into Western style comics, very difficult, honestly, compared to the anime scene where again, they're like, that's old. We're into the new stuff now. Bring on the new stuff. And it doesn't need to be associated to anything old. You know, like I'm not saying that like, because for sure people that are Western market, they want new stuff, but they always want it to be somehow affiliated to the old stuff at the same time. Like Spectacular Spider-Man, great cartoon. They made it completely new in their own, but it's still Spider-Man. I feel like nowadays, you know, media is just afraid to take a dip into something completely original and new, because when you hang on to something that's nostalgic, you know, you're guaranteed at least the admission. You know, someone's going to pay to go see that new Batman, whether it's good or it's bad, because it says Batman on it. And if it's good, well, that's great. Let's see if we can't milk it for all it's worth. But I mean, how many movies would I love to see of comic book heroes that I'm just like, oh, that's like never going to get a film. That's why I push Dread down everyone's throat.
Okay, first of all, great segue to a question, but I'm just going to say right now, I saw Dread on a Sunday with some friends, with some tacos at Carlos and Pepe's afterwards, and it was one of the greatest cinematic experiences ever, because there was nobody in the cinema besides us, hence why it bombed, but nobody was there on their cell phones ruining it either. And I just remember being, Dread is awesome is just the words that came out of my mouth for the next few years, and you can't mention Dread without how awesome it is. And Carl Urban, there's a clip that I know for a fact is going to either be on the Montreal Comic Con YouTube page. If it's not there right now, it will be there soon, of Carl Urban talking how he got hired in Dread and how he talked with the creators, and he said to them, and I won't mimic his accent because I don't want to insult him. But he's basically said, listen, I just want to say before we begin this meeting, if you want to take the helmet off of him, there's no point on us talking. Like, I will only do this if you keep the helmet on, because that's what he's supposed to be. And I'm just like, fuck yes. And then he proceeds to do the Dread voice where he doesn't have the helmet on, but you see the look in Carl Urban's eyes of what it would have been like had you seen his eyes. And it's a very interesting process given what a fucking amazing actor he is. But I'm still glad, like in the new Batman movie, you barely get any Bruce Wayne. It's really just about Batman and keeping that cowl on. And considering movie stars the way they are, they want to be seen. They hate wearing the outfit, whatever. You've heard that through every Batman movie.
Too.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting that they're at a place right now, even with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, with the the eyes kind of being a little animated. You can keep the mask on him longer and still convey all this emotion. There was this thing when Spider-Man 2 came out where they're like, oh, he takes his mask off all the fucking time. And I'm like, yeah, but he was stopping the train. And, he needed to exemplify that if it weren't for my spider powers, my arms would be pulling out of their sockets because I'm stopping a train with my bare hands. But you see that with
the costume. The costume's ripping up. You see his muscles, and he's screaming. Like, if anything, I would have done like the bottom half of the mask that was ripped off. They classically do that.
I know, but this is not exactly emotionally invigorating as this.
I know, but
Toby
if you see like
Toby taking a shit face.
Let's say it's this, and like they could have broken one of his things so you could see it, but enough so that if somebody saw him, they wouldn't be like, hey, I know you. You're the only guy that takes decent pictures of Spider-Man. Everyone knows you.
It would have. What I really did like about it, though, and like made me almost cry in the cinema, is that when they're like, the guy says he's just a kid. I'm like, oh
yeah, it's good.
True, because everyone thinks he's probably like this 35-year-old guy, and it's like, nah, 22 maybe.
But Toby kind of looks it though.
Yeah.
He's a big guy, man.
Yeah, Toby always, he had a baby face, but he seemed really old to play Spider-Man. At least Tom Holland really conveyed that Marty McFly teenage energy. And
Yeah.
whatever. I love all Spider-Man except Amazing Spider-Man villains. Fucking hated those villains. I liked Andrew, but I didn't like his movies. And
Me neither. And Andrew was a great Spidey. Like
Great
to this
Spidey.
day, nobody can sling insults like Andy, man. Like that guy, great insults. Like I could picture him bullying his villains to the point where they become the super villains. Like that's what's Spider-Man's thing, So like, that's a great character for real. He was a good Spidey.
He was a great Spidey, but Toby had all the best villains. William Dafoe. That Doc Ock was fucking awesome. I mean, even Sandman was great. We all talk about Venom not being that great in it, but like comic book wise, like everyone just wants a big brute.
Yeah, Topher Grace was a rough choice, man. Rough choice to play Venom for real. Like you just hired another Parker. Like they should have. I don't know, man. Whatever. All right, let's go back to the 90s.
There you go. Fuck it. Let's talk about the 90s. But the 90s, they didn't make Judge Dredd good at all. That was some Studio Notes stupidity bullshit. I put Judge Dredd. I've been playing a game with friends recently called Triple Feature, where you put 3 movies that kind of like all belong in the same thing, even though they could be decades apart, whatever, just kind of remind you of each other. And Judge Dredd reminds me of Tank Girl and the Super Mario Brothers. And what the fuck were you thinking?
Oh, man.
Like post-apocalyptic, mostly desert movie set in the future, that kind of thing. Except Tank Girl, I realize these days is actually pretty awesome. I saw
Tank Girl is really good.
Yeah.
Like it's stupid, but it was stupid on purpose. Like Judge Dredd, the first 5 minutes of that film were actually pretty great. And then I was cool with it. Honestly, like I watched it recently and the first like 5 or 6 minutes, like up to the point where they arrest him. Yeah. I was enjoying that film. And the second they arrest him and the second Rob Schneider shows up, I'm like,
I know.
What am I watching? Oh man.
Yeah.
And like the colors and how zany it is and the use of budget, like for real, it almost made me think of like The Fifth Element with its campy style and stuff. Only, The Fifth Element was freaking awesome because it was supposed to be like that. Dredd is supposed to be like a dark thing where you see Dredd and you're like, well, he's clearly the hero. And as you keep watching, you're like, I guess he's the hero. Like, who am I going to vote for? This guy or this hardcore murderer? Like, I guess I have to vote for the cop.
Yeah.
It's really good, man. The dogma in that film is nuts. Like, very well done.
And then also a triple feature you could do is in the video game trilogy with Super Mario Brothers, Double Dragon, and Street Fighter. And I got Mortal Kombat's the best one out of all of them, but you're just like, they made 4 video game movies essentially in a row, and all of them are just so strangely chosen. Like Street Fighter.
Hold on. I'd like to hire a Belgian, non-English speaking actor to play my American lead role, please. Okay. Okay.
But Mortal Kombat was a fucking blast, and it's got the best soundtrack. Fucking best soundtrack. I love it.
Man, that's reptile fight. The music and even the fight, like so sick. Sick. It was a good fight too, man. Really good. I honestly think it was the best fight in the movie for me. Like even when he fights Shao Kahn at the end, it's like I get it's like kind of like metaphysical at one point. So I know what you're going for. But I got to say the best fight in that movie is probably Sonya Blade versus Kano. That was such a bad fight, but I loved it so much.
I liked it more when Sonya Blade was beating the shit out of Billy Madison before he started singing. Like, I thought that was a better fight. I think that's a better use of that actress's fighting skill was when she was just beating the shit out of Adam Sandler.
Well, I'm joking, man, honestly. Yeah, but that for real, like... But that Kano actor, for real, in that Mortal Kombat movie, like, sold me so much in that film. Hello, baby. Did you miss me? He's got, like, chicken in his beard.
Did you see the new Mortal Kombat movie?
Nah. Nope, I have not. I
dude.
watched
It
the
does.
Mortal Kombat internet shorts. Some of them are cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
the new movie, in my opinion, there's some decent moments, but it really doesn't land. Like, they have a new character that created out of nowhere, and look, honestly, it's a spoiler, but had they made him turn into Scorpion or be Scorpion's descendant, it would have made sense. But he was just a guy that's a guy, and he's not a character, and it doesn't really matter, and nothing matters, and that's what I don't like about movies. I don't like when things don't matter at all,
yeah,
and
man.
and it's hard to watch too because I saw this animated movie out of the blue with my best bud. This was during COVID times, and came he came in the backyard, and we had a projector screen up, and we hadn't seen each other in so long, and we put on this thing called Scorpion's Revenge, and it's just the most badass animated, brutal, fucking deadly, awesome Mortal Kombat thing I've ever seen besides that first movie. And
Well,
everything else looks like shit after it because it's so brutal. And from Community voices Johnny Cage, and it's so fucking perfect. And you're like, I'm so glad that stuff that's new like this can get it right so hardcore. And I am grateful that people keep going back to things until they get it right. And I find they really got that one right.
Well, I remember those little internet shorts. The first few were
Mm,
really well done. I remember the Johnny Cage one. They hired the Red
mm.
Power Ranger to play the part, and not the original Red Power Ranger from the '90s. I think it was the
Oh,
second or the third one.
Steve Cardenas, maybe.
I don't remember. I'm so sorry. But they hired him and they
Mm.
actually played it like he was him. They're like, people just remember you playing the Power Ranger and nobody cares about that anymore. And he wanted to be more relevant. So he would go out and with people were like having fights in the street, he would get involved and he would beat everybody up. And it was like, it was getting darker and darker. And like people like his like newscaster people were like, you got to stop doing this. It's not like healthy for you. And then Shao Kahn shows up and he's like, if you're interested, maybe you might be into this, but he doesn't look like Shao Kahn. I don't know if you've seen those little shorts, but
No, I haven't.
they were awesome. The Raiden one is sick. He comes down to earth, but when he hits the earth, he like gets up and he's kind of shook up because he's like somewhat mortal. And it's right next to an insane asylum. And they grab him because he's like, I'm the god of thunder. And they start heavily dosing him. And so he's stuck in this insane asylum and he can't get out. And he keeps saying he's the god of thunder. And he is, but he can't get out. And it's like, they're like 10-minute short videos, and some of them are really good. I remember that the actor who played Jax was the guy from Spawn, Al Simmons.
Nice. Yeah,
and I don't remember the name of the actor. I'm sorry, but like
Michael J. White. Michael J. White, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that is him. Yeah. But man, those ones were really cool. And going back to 90s, for me, Street Fighter was that Street Fighter 2 animated movie. Like I remember that Chun-Li Vega fight. I know leading up to it, you got Chun-Li in the shower, and it's like all the young kids that are interested in girls are gonna look at that and be like,
dude,
but
I saw the VHS version where they blurred everything as a kid, and that still made me sweat. So lo and behold, the surprise I had 10 odd years ago popping on the DVD of it, I'm like, oh, this one's in widescreen. Jesus fucking Christ. It came out of nowhere. I got in a
fight scene.
I got nostalgia fluster. But yeah, the fight scene was fucking great. Yeah.
So well done, so well animated, so well directed. Like everything from like him like jumping on the bed to her pulling off the covers to knock him over and just throwing all of her stuff in her room at him, and like him cutting her up, and as she's fighting, she's like having a hard time because she's losing a lot of blood. Like, what? How is this so great?
Amazing. Chun-Li's fucking amazing in that movie. And Guile's an asshole. Like Guile's useless. He's like, oh, I better go save her. And meanwhile, Chun-Li's fucking upside down, spin kicking fucking Vega in the face.
Yeah, awesome. And the way they did it was like not like in the game where she does this and like floats upside down. Like she's literally spinning with her hand. Like the animation quality. I remember like the first minute of that movie, you have like a brainwashed Cammy running through the people, handstands on top of this guy, splits out her legs, spins around, breaks his neck, and you're like,
nice.
Wow, the animation quality is so good that you're just. It's hard. It's hard to watch things like Dragon Ball after that, man, where they're just like teleport, punch, 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 punch. But I mean, I understand the appeal because the hype in Dragon Ball is I'm gonna hit you with this at one point, and when he does, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But have you seen Mortal Kombat: Scorpion's Revenge? It's called Mortal Kombat Legends. Oh, Eric, you're in for a surprise, my friend. It's cool. And then they made another one about Liu Kang. But yeah, then the new shit they're doing, fucking good, man. I really, as a lover of the lore or whatever, I think. Have you ever seen? You're in like anime and manga more than me. Like I will say I have not seen a bazillion of them, and then sometimes I've always find their third acts get a little weird. But there was a Street Fighter Alpha anime in which Ken and
Mhm.
Ryu are training together, and they're talking about the darkness that comes with the style that they were fighting, and
Yeah, the Akuma.
yeah. What do you think of those ones? Because I watched them, I'm like, this is really cool, but there's something I'm just not getting. But at the same time, I'm like, well, that's just because I'm a poser. Like, I know this is
No,
good.
man, don't.
Yeah.
It's not like that for real. Like, good storytelling is good storytelling, and honestly, they didn't have the best storytelling. Like, a
Okay,
lot of
good. Now
those
I
things
feel less
don't.
bad. All right.
Like they're kind of like excerpts. So it's like if you, man, Capcom, they have all these great IPs and they don't do anything with them, or they give them the worst writing because they just don't care. It's really difficult to deal with things like that. I mean, you lose out on so many great things like Mega Man and Darkstalkers and all these awesome Capcom IPs where you're like, please give me more and write a story for this. But they don't do it. So, like, for real, they got lucky with the Street Fighter 2 animated film back in the day. The Alpha ones were all right, I guess. Like
Yeah, okay.
I
Good.
vaguely remember them because I think I rented them at Blockbuster back when Blockbuster was a thing. And but this is years ago. But I did watch them, and I even watched like that Americanized style TV show too, which was terrible but hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alpha was like, for real. I don't know, man. With your problem with a lot of third acts to anime, well, you don't watch enough. Like at one point, if all you're watching is the ones that are popular in a like over here, well, the thing is, the ones that are popular here are ones that either go on forever or they manage to make a deal with like Funimation or with Netflix or Crunchyroll at the time. And so it's not all going to be awesome when you watch things like that. Like Demon Slayer is pretty great. It's going to be short too. Like it's not going on forever. The manga's already over despite many people wanting her to keep writing the series. She's not doing it. She's done. She's like, if anything, she's going to do another story in the series, but about different characters in the same universe. But what's cool about that is it's short and sweet. So like that series probably going to last like 3 or 4 seasons and then it'll be over. There's shows like Full Metal Alchemist and specifically Brotherhood. There's 2 of them. They both seem the same, but Brotherhood is one that's really more accurate to the manga. That show start to end, amazing. One for people that love doing creating their own things is called Recreators. It's like 25 episodes of awesome, man. And it's basically like, like at one point how there's that anime sort of online where they're like, let's all go into the digital world. And, oh no, we're stuck here. And the first half was amazing. And I personally am not in the rest of it, but I have a few friends that like it. It's just for me, I'm like, it kind of dragged on for my taste. But I mean, Recreators would be like if people from the most amazing video games, cartoon shows, and comic books showed up in our world. And it'd be like a popular person. It could be a villain. What are they going to start doing? They have all this power. They could just, some of them are murderers, like some of them are like Sailor Moon and things like that. And they want to like save the world. And so that show is incredible. And I don't want to talk too much about it because if you want to watch, it's good. But there's a lot of really good animes out there, like I said, that are short and sweet. You just got to find them. Like Cowboy Bebop is one of the ones that's everywhere. And that one is incredible, start to finish. Great anime. But
what do you think of the live action show?
I thought it was interesting that making a live action show seem more cartoonish than the cartoon. I don't know who their target audience was. Honestly, like they made this show where they like, at first they're like, look at the visual aspect. It feels kind of like the anime. So they're trying to suck in the people that love the anime. But then when you watch it, they change it so much that the fans of the show, who was originally their target audience, they're not going to enjoy it. And because it's too different, you change it up too much. Like there's certain aspects I don't mind. It's just that like they took out too much from the source material. And I'm not even talking visually. I'm talking like storytelling wise. Like the guy who wrote Cowboy Bebop is an amazing storyteller. He wrote an anime called Samurai Champloo, which is incredible. And he also did a short in the Animatrix back in the day about a detective. And it was all in like noir style. And for some of you that remember the Animatrix, but like the Matrix drawing thing, but for real, his writing is so good. Like I remember in the live action at one point, he flips a coin, does a super ninja kick, kicks the coin, and it hits the guy in the head. That would never happen in the cartoon. That's highly unrealistic. Like in the cartoon, a guy would pull out a gun and then he'd flip up a table and then the table would get in the guy's face and then he'd run around and just start beating him up and then the guy would throw some punches. He'd take a few hits and he throws a couple of punches. Like it, I mean, he wouldn't dive through a ceiling. There's literally a scene where he does go through the ceiling, but there's actually an air vent. He like goes through the air vent. There's a whole scene about it because he's too big to fit in there. And then when the air vent kind of breaks in and then he jumps out and he's like, I'm here too now. Having a guy jump through chip rock and who knows how much metal, like, what is going on here? You know, like, what is this? So it's just, I don't understand who their target audience was.
There's an animal climbing behind you and it's really cute.
Oh, it's probably my cat. My wife is sleeping. Well, she's clearly awake, but very frustrated.
Nice.
She teaches, so she wakes up super early in the morning, like 5 to teach away.
So I gotta ask you, like what you just said, really, like, you know, I'm gonna watch Cowboy Bebop. I have not really seen the animated, the anime, so I'm gonna watch it just as is. But I did appreciate kind of how kind of like, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino they were with some of their choices, and Robert Rodriguez with the action, but Tarantino with kind of like the gels and the music. But I can appreciate it just kind of like, it's not the anime, it's this other thing, and I'm sure I'll enjoy both of them. But considering you're so heavily invested in your love of anime, do you prefer hearing the original Japanese and reading it, or can you live with the dubbing?
Oh man, okay. This is something that a lot of the community is super divided on. I like both. Honestly, there's some anime that aren't dubbed at all, and you have to read the subtitles. And because I spend like my work days are usually like wake up at 9, start drawing at 9:30, stop drawing at 2 in the morning, go to bed. So for me to say I'm going to stop for like a couple hours to watch a show, or even like a half an hour to watch a show, it'll be like while I'm eating. Otherwise, I can watch shows while I'm drawing. I do it all the time. I try to watch things I've already seen, like season 6 of The Simpsons over and over again because I freaking love Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien, amazing writer, and his whole run on The Simpsons, I love it. But so I find myself watching more dubbed than subtitled, but I would never say, I think it depends because some subtitles are really good. Most of them are better, I would say, but there are some dubs that are so well done. Like there's an anime, it's one of my favorite of all time, and it's called Toradora. And this thing is like 25 episodes. It's a romantic comedy, and from start to finish, I love it. It literally starts off where you have these kids, and as you get to, once you're at the end, they're not kids, they're adults, and it's like their lives going through school, and it's such an emotional roller coaster, and so well done. I watched it all subtitled, I watched it all dubbed, and I actually prefer the dubbing because they hired incredibly good voice actors, and they rewrote a few of the jokes and a few of the things so that it works more for an English viewing audience. Whereas Japanese, a lot of times they might do jokes or bring up references that you'll have to be on the internet checking it out to understand what it is because you didn't grow up within their culture. But as a rule, I would usually say subbed is superior. But again, man, like there's some incredible dubs out there, and some of them are definitely worth watching. And, you know, like a lot of the Disney dubs, I'm going to call them, you know, like if you're watching Hayao Miyazaki films like Princess Mononoke, oh my gosh, like they hired the voice actor who did Goliath from back in the day to do one of the characters. When you hear that guy's voice, you're like,
Keith David.
Keith David. Oh my gosh, I love Keith David.
Wanda. Yeah, he was also the voice of Spawn, one of the greatest fucking animated superhero shows ever. Followed by Image Comics, man. They did a lot of weird shit sometimes. It was just like, big explosive muscles and belt buckles. But, you don't think of Walking Dead as an Image comic, but it is. But Invincible is an amazing fucking show. Like, so awesome. And you could put it next to Spawn, and then there's 20 years of difference, but it's still the same core. Like, our audience are not a bunch of like little kids that need a happy ending. Like, you've grown up with comics. This is for you. This is like, you've held on with us this long. Here you go. We trust you. This is fucked up and we know you can take it. And I love content like that. I love that we live in a world where you can have kind of like, your CW flash shows where running solves everything. And a 10-year-old can watch that and just kind of use that as a gateway drug into this world of comic books. But then you have like these badass shows like The Boys where it's just like, hey, all you adults, you like your blood? This is pretty fucking cool. And just today, Eric, for the first time, I saw this thing on Amazon Prime called The Boys Diabolical, which is an animated spin-off of, it's kind of a hybrid between the show and the comic book, and it's these little short stories. And in the first one, dude, it's kind of like an old school Warner Brothers animation of a guy going to work for Vite, and they have super babies, and one of them has lasers out of her eyes, and she gets out, and it's him constantly trying. There's no talking in the thing, like an old Warner Brothers cartoon. And dun, 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 and she's climbing up buildings, and he's like, the person trying to get to her. And then it turns into if it was written and produced by Itchy and Scratchy, and the violence you see in Itchy and Scratchy are done in the Warner Brothers style, where everyone can bleed and arms fall off and all this other shit. And you're like, holy shit, I love being a nerd, man. Only in 2022 will all this shit come together and be so readily available for mass consumption. This is a fucking great time to be alive. You ever feel that way?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually, it's funny you say that. The other day I had said that to my wife, because I'm currently watching Static Shock,
Nice.
Gem I'd never seen, and it takes place in the Bruce Timm universe. Bruce Timm universe, for some of you that don't know, is like the DC animated series, like Batman into Superman, Batman Beyond, Justice League, Justice League Unlimited. And it's, for me, the best DC thing ever of all time. Like, I like it more than the comics, any of the movies. Yeah, it has a start, a middle, and an end. Like, literally, Justice League Unlimited connects things from the original Batman, Superman, all of Justice League. Like, if you watch all of it in an order, you're just going to be like, wow. Like, the last episode of Batman Beyond is like an Unlimited episode, and it's, oh my gosh. Like, I don't know how to define how good it is. Like, even for someone like you, let's say you've never seen it, if you watch Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond, you find that episode. It's about Batman Beyond. He's not a kid, he's an adult, and he meets up with Amanda Waller, who's super old, and you find out where he comes from and his whole past and why he is Batman, and it's so nuts. But yeah, it's just, I find that the iterations are the best. Like, they reinvented so many. They reinvented the wheel in a way that's so good. It made me love Superman. Like, I always thought Superman was just OP, but when you watch that cartoon, you're like, man, he's got it rough. Like, the whole world is cardboard for him. If he hugs somebody too hard, if he opens a door too hard, it's just nuts what goes through his head. And that cartoon was so good. But yeah, I found out Static Shock was in that universe, and I always wanted to watch Static Shock. And so now I'm like kind of going through it, but it's got like the commercials as I'm watching it. So coming up next, Teen Titans on the Fox box or whatever, W, whatever. And I'm just like, this is cool, man. Plus, like, Batman makes an appearance in it. You got Green Lantern in it, like the Flash, like, so good. But yeah, all those cartoon commercials, I was like, oh man, I miss old school Teen Titans Go. That was like or not Go, but before Go, where it was like really anime style mixed with like, that was a fun show, man. And like a lot of things back then were good. And that's like 2000s, like going back to the 90s. But yeah, even now there's some really great stuff. And with Kickstarter, oh my gosh, I love it, for real. Like, I don't know how I would have done things otherwise. Like, for the past 8 years, I've been publishing my own comic, working my butt off. Like I said, I work crazy shifts and like working on my book, and then I work a part-time job so that I can pay for my book. So I am like a perpetual poorness, because if I work too much at a part-time job, then I don't have time to work on my comic. And so it's like, you got to balance that out. So I work like bare minimum past a month if I have to be able to produce. And things like Kickstarter, man, it's my first time doing one, and it's just amazing. Like, it's really helpful. Like, I've already got the numbers, it's already going to get produced, and now I'm just hoping to start hitting like those tiers, so that like those stretch goals, that I can start like giving people more free stuff and things like that. I always thought that'd be cool. Plus, the more that I make, the more I can print things in color and everything. Like, every dollar I spend goes towards stuff like this, man. And growing up in the 90s, you probably bought a lot of toys, a lot of collectibles. I used to get Magic cards, so a lot of those are worth so much. So over the years, because I'm working so little, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can just work one day a week and I can sell some Magic cards or sell some of my old school comic books to help me keep working. So it's like a lot of what I loved is helping support me right now. But honestly, it's there's only so much stuff I have. So it's the Kickstarter. I didn't really talk about my comic and what it's about. Like, do you mind if I like talk about it real quick right now?
Of course. I just didn't realize our own the nature of our conversations, where we just talk about anything and everything. please talk like fuck about your comic book.
All right,
And he
I'll
probably even
just
come
make
back on too and just talk about your comic book, but talk about your comic book now.
cool, man. So it's all about the first day of school. Like when I was a kid, I moved around a lot. I had a
Mm.
lot of first days. Some of them were amazing and some of them were terrible. You meet so many people and it's so much like it's not real. Like everybody, especially on the first day, they all wear a new mask. You'd be like, hey, I know that kid from last year. He's not that same kid anymore. He is, but he's wearing different clothes, or he's got a new haircut, or she looks a little bit more different, or she's putting on makeup to make herself look more, or she's going to be mean because she thinks that can get her more friends, or he'll be nicer because he thinks that can get him more friends. Like these happens all the time. It's just a giant play, and people are all playing their parts. None of it's real until like more days go by, and then you start to really get to know these people because there's only so much acting a lot of people can do. So my whole comic, like I've come out with 8 issues so far, and it's only the first day of school. Like the first issue, like the first chapter is the night before. The second chapter is getting up, eating breakfast, going to school. Third one is orientation. Fourth one is 5 minutes before the first class. Like that 5 minutes where people are finding their seats. They're like sitting next to people that maybe they don't want to sit next to. And my manga takes place outside the realms of time and space. Like imagine every single universe is a star in the sky. Like that's a universe, and they blanket the sky that these creatures look at, and it's all inside like let's say like a giant oval. So like on one side of that oval you've got a group of creatures called Macopians. On the other side you have like the Verilic, and it's a place called Elysia, and they've been at war since forever. And then all of a sudden a being shows up that's so powerful that she forces them into a peace. And then 1,000 years go by, and she then creates a college, and she picks out specific people, and she's like, you're going to show up for a week at this college. If you don't, I'm just going to kill all of you. Like you get a choice. So she's very aggressive and I guess dread style way of thinking to create the peace, but at the same time getting these people to get to know each other. Like there's a line from the movie Clerks I heard when I was a little kid, and I watched Clerks for the first time. Or no, it was Mallrats, sorry, where they said, understanding it is brought through comprehension is brought through confrontation. And I thought that was so beautiful. And like most of my manga is all that. And confrontation doesn't mean fighting, doesn't mean throwing a punch. Sometimes it does, but a lot of the times it's all emotional. Like you could be talking to somebody on the phone and you could become best friends with that person, and then the day you see that person and you find out their culture, maybe it's something that was completely against yours, where you would have grown up enemies for some reason. Like that's messed up to think that. So at the end of the day, like I was saying earlier, like my whole manga is all about love, and it's all about acceptance and and discrimination and getting to know people, and it's all about that very first day of school. The whole thing is the first day.
I remember fantasizing about every time I'd go back to school. I was like very much like Doug Funny, having these fantasies about like, oh, this year I'm going to be cool, or next year I'm going to be cool, and I'm going to walk down the street and you're going to be like, oh man, he's coming. He's coming up. Wow. And it never fucking happened. But I remember the perpetual like fantasy and hope and fear and dread about that first day of school. So what you're saying is very interesting to me. I was getting a little bit of anxiety thinking about first days of school and the situations your characters must be in, especially considering they'll die if they don't go to this school. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of like throughout their cultures, it's kind of like accepted because it's been 1,000 years now that this person's been in power. Because my people don't die of old age; they will die of other extenuating circumstances. But age, no. At one point, they hit the age of let's say 25 to 30, and then they just look that way forever. So like it's kind of a constant. They're like, yes, this person is the strongest person, especially since the Macopian side, which are, I guess you could say, look kind of more like demons. Their whole culture has been based off of physical, and not to say physical, let's say power, because the strongest person is somewhat omnipotent, so they can do certain things. So that's why they're the strongest. So they're used to this. So when somebody else shows up and is like, now I'm in power and you're going to listen to me, they're like, yeah, right, whatever. It's a big place, man. Like I said, if a star in the sky is an entire universe, like their plane of existence is massive, and it would go on forever for a human. But and meanwhile, the Verilic, which is the other side, they're kind of like bees and they follow orders. So when the person who created them, I guess you could say kind of like their queen of the hive, says, you're going to go to school because I'm being told that you have to. then they'll be like, understood, and then they're just going to go and do it. It's kind of like nonchalant. They all kind of fear her, and there's moments in my manga where you see her and she seems so nice and so friendly, but then things will happen when you're like, okay, she's nice and friendly, but she's still like very frightening. But then they just get back into the beat of, being like teenagers and trying to just connect with one another.
I find those are the best villains actually, because the ones who are like, oh my god, they seem so nice. Like what I don't understand why everybody always says this, and then you have that moment where you have to define define their authority or somehow, and then that part comes out of nowhere, and you're like, how did this sweet angel turn into like you could see the gears turning in their eyes. And I love villains like that. So I'm really glad that your villain doesn't just walk around twirling the mustache and being profoundly obnoxiously evil at all times. Like those aren't really good villains. I'm
I
glad.
find it funny you say she's a villain, because she's literally the one that brought peace to my whole plane of existence. Like, if
There
she
you
didn't
go.
exist,
Yeah.
there'd still be war and there'd still be people killing each other left and right. And her rules aren't like, you need to follow this guideline. She's just like, stop fighting with one another. That's it.
Well,
If
yeah.
if you keep fighting, then I'm going to put my foot down and I'm just going to kill the people that are fighting, but I'll just keep doing it. So stop it. And it's okay to have domestic disputes, and it's okay to get in a fight with somebody here and there. But I mean like a war, like to cause like a huge war. So the war's been going on for an incalculable amount of time, and then she shows up and sort of stops it. And there's a few people that back her, a lot of people that don't, because they want to take over more property. And she's the one that's literally like, no, this is as far as you go. So she comes off as a villain to some, but to the other people, it's literally allowing these students in my manga to go to a school and to all get to meet each other. And meeting each other, all of a sudden they're going to realize that there's like, some of them aren't going to get along, but some of them will. So it's just, I don't know, like I wouldn't say I really have like a definitive villain. Like, there are characters that you're going to read and be like, oh, I don't like this person, and as you're reading it, you might continue not to like it, because I spent so much time designing the personality to every single character in here. Every single student is so unique. So there's some characters you'll love and some you'll just straight up hate from the beginning, and even though they might seem like they're better as they go on, you just might not like them.
Do they have
So
any
it might be your villain.
Do they have any character arcs where like people people who fucking hate each other eventually become like best buds and stuff? Like, kind of like in Digimon, how Ken was originally like the Digimon Emperor and the big bad in season 1, but ends up being like, their homie. And in season 2, I like when that happens, because that represents real life to me. Like, some of my best friends in the world, when I first met them, I'm like, what a dick. And now it's been like 20 years of friendship later, and parents to their godparents to their kids, that kind of stuff. But it all starts off with, who's this asshole?
Yeah, man, that's it. And I definitely have some of that in my comic. Like, at the beginning, you're going to see certain characters, like I said, that don't connect, and some connect right away. And then as it goes on, it connects less. So they're like, like, I put all that in there, man. Like I said, I've had a lot of crazy experiences, and I try to throw everything, well, maybe not everything, but a lot of things in there.
I've had friendships for years where all we had in common was the fact we were drunk and we liked the same band. And then when, either of those things would change, all of a sudden you realize you're not really hanging out anymore. And you realize like some of these friendships, and even the term on Facebook when they say, oh, my friend, because Facebook pretty much said friend, it's just like, prior to social media, you would have called them an accomplice. Not an accomplice. You would have just called them like a person you kind of know. Yeah. Or a colleague or that kind of stuff. But like, Facebook's kind of been like, if you've connected digitally, whatever, that means you're friends. And I find it's kind of bastardized the importance of the word, and how, our willingness to stick together is kind of been bastardized, like I said, because a real friend, if you don't agree on one thing politically, you will not immediately delete them out of your fucking life. You'll have a conversation, you'll talk some shit to each other, you'll laugh and you'll hug. Facebook friend, like that little connection that barely actually exists, that's so frail, you're willing to like wash someone completely out of your life, like you shouldn't have been calling them a friend in the first place, in my opinion. But you know,
Yeah.
we're old. We look young, but we're old. You know?
That's true, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of my really good friends, because I keep iterating. I draw and I work all the time, so
Yeah.
I'm just lucky that I don't have friends that hate on me for not seeing them. It's kind of like I won't see them for like a year, and then when I'm done my current issue and I have like a month before convention season, so I've got like some time to do stuff. I'll see them, I'll hang out. It's like I saw them yesterday. It's been like a whole year, you know. And they're usually like, I'll be like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" And they'll give me this huge list of like everything they've done, and then they'll be like, "How about you, man? How have you been up to?" And I'm like, "Oh well, you know, drawing. That's it." I guess I got like a new transformer. I mean, like 4 months ago.
If you read my book, you'll see what my life is like. You know,
Oh man, well,
it's all
that's
on the
that's
page.
an interesting thing to bring up, because a lot of my friends aren't particularly into what I do. You know, like they are more into like Western and American style comics and things like that. And they all support me though. Like they've all purchased my comics and things like that. But I know they haven't read them. They're just like, "We're supporting you, bro." And I'm like, "Thanks, man. I appreciate it, guys." It's just that I'm like, it's weird. Like all the things that I'm really into, I don't really connect. I don't really have like people in my close circle that are into the same sort of things. Like I had like, there's a little bit, you know, but not to my extent.
Well, I consider us friends now because we've been talking
Yeah,
for
man.
two straight hours effortlessly, and I'm sure if I only saw you in a year, it could it would be the same fucking conversation. But I gotta say, I want to support your book, and I want to read the old books. I want to do the whole deep dive. You've been doing this This is not a new comic book you're pushing. This is a continuation, correct? This is what this
Yep.
Kickstarter is.
Every year I come out with one chapter because I put everything in color and I self-publish and I do all the lettering and everything. It takes
How many
a year to do a
pages?
chapter.
How many pages?
Currently, it's if let's say you get the Kickstarter and you get everything that I'm offering, it's going to be 190.
See, there you go. When I hear like here I am, Mr. Cowboy and Western comic book doesn't know shit about fuck. I'm like, oh, so it's like 30 pages? No. Like fucking mangas are big. I have the first actually it's right here. You know when they say one man's junk's another person's treasure? So I got this for 50 cents. This Dragon Ball book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's got 3 volumes like in one. The thing is massive, and
Yeah.
it's like 4 episodes probably. No, it's actually like 18 episodes. It moves so much faster in the manga books. But just to say, did you traditionally do the same thing where you read left to right, like where you're gonna go
Nope.
really old school?
No, man. Like my comic is you read it
Ooh,
Western style.
let's
So
get a
you go
close.
from
Let's get a close up of this beauty.
right
Yeah,
to left.
and it's big
And
too.
or no, sorry, yeah, left. Yeah, you read left to right. Yeah, you read like an American comic book, and the whole thing's in color. And unlike mangas, I put a ton of detail in all my backgrounds and even my characters and their clothing and everything. So it's pretty intense. Oh, and for a lot of people, if they want to pay that little extra on Kickstarter, I actually do a sketch on the inside. Like you would pick out a character, and I'll draw a hard copy sketch for you to make it unique and special.
I'm an asshole. I'd be like, this is my favorite color. Please make him peeing.
No, you tell me what character you want. I'm gonna draw it. I'm not gonna take like requests. Like if you could draw like one of your characters doing a backflip over New York City.
Have you? Okay, Eric, you are. I'm giving you a mission in life, and I'm just saying you can do this. You cannot do this, but I'm saying that if you, this is just because you're talented and you know how to put things into the world, and I think you're the most qualified person to do this. Can you please, for the love of God, do a slightly anime-looking Conan O'Brien at his desk? Because just I've never seen that before. I'm sure it would kill on Instagram. Just holy shit. If I could just if there could just be anything, a Conan O'Brien manga, anything. I love Conan O'Brien so much. My wife and I, like, when we first met each other, we were like, I was like, I'm like, I don't even know if I'm gonna hang out with her. I mean, she's beautiful, but that's not enough. Like, what are we gonna do? And then she brought up how much she loved Norm Macdonald and Chris Farley and Conan O'Brien and all these things, and all of a sudden all the bells and lights, and it's been 11 years, and we laugh all the time. And all we ever do is laugh and quote Conan O'Brien constantly. And every time I meet a Conan O'Brien fan, such as yourself, that's like that hardcore about it, it's like there's this kinship where it's just like, do you remember when Jay Leno fucked him out of the Tonight Show? And it almost poured gasoline on his fan base because we all like fucking casual Conan O'Brien fans all of a sudden became hardcore Conan O'Brien fans overnight.
Yeah, and it unfortunately bled over to poor Jimmy Fallon. Like a lot of Conan fans look at that guy and they're like, you should have backed up your comedic colleague, man, and you didn't. They offered you the money in the spot, and you're like, I'm gonna take it. So it's hard, man. It's hard, but Conan O'Brien's been to Japan, man. I'm pretty sure there's a beautiful anime picture of him. I'm sure you look up Conan O'Brien anime, and I bet you there's tons of artwork. DeviantArt exists, right? So
I'm sure. Especially like a tall redheaded gentleman like himself. There's no way they didn't draw him, except maybe he's kind of like a Ronald McDonald fighting Godzilla over Tokyo giant fucking bill guy.
Well, he'd be short, but his hair would be as tall as Godzilla.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So, dude, okay, love the concept of the book. Where can people get this book? I mean, you're a self-publisher. It's not just about the new Kickstarter. Let's bring up the old too. How can they support the past and the future?
So everything is on Kickstarter right now. Like I made my Kickstarter to make my new individual chapter because I usually come out with like chapters like this. And so I made Kickstarter for that. But there's tons of different tiers and they offer my whole series on there. Right now, I'm just sticking with that. Other than that, I'm going to wait until everybody gets their stuff for Kickstarter in August, which is when I'm going to ship everything out. And then I'll make an online store in August too, where some people can access some of these things. Of course, with Kickstarter, I'm going to offer certain goodies or I'm going to make certain things unique to the people that bought it and supported me on Kickstarter. Always got to give a little more. Otherwise, conventions. Every convention, like I just applied for Anime North. I've never been, but it seems like it's my people and I really have always wanted to go. So I applied for a table there. We'll see. I'm going to be applying for a table at a Talkathon like I do every year at Montreal and Montreal Comic Con, of course. Honestly, Ryan, I love that we get to talk like this because I've been seeing you and I've seen so many people at conventions where I'll start great conversations off. And then at one point it's like, there's a ton of people and, it's kind of like that customer service thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to keep talking to this person all day. But at the same time, I need to serve these clients that want to get my book or some of my drawings. So I never get to like express myself as properly as I would want to, or get to have good conversations like this. I have great ones at conventions, but they always get cut off super short. And I always feel super bad about it. I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I'm working. I'm so sorry.
And then you're making eye contact with somebody and then your eye voluntarily goes lazy to pay attention to the people walking up to your booth on the side. And you're like, I need to Blithe them right now because everyone's a potential customer. And as much as you telling me what you had for lunch is interesting, I need to sell my fucking book. This is why we're here.
It's the dream, man. The more people that get to read it, I'm just hoping it can get more and more popular. Like, man, the real dream is if I could turn this thing into like a board game, anime statues, and an anime. Like that would be nuts. I mean, can you imagine? Canadian man makes anime. I was going to say Canadian boy. I think I'm past that. Canadian man makes anime. Blah, blah, blah.
Do you refer to yourself as a man? Like not in a gender sense, but just like I couldn't consider myself, if I ever had to call myself like Batman, I'm like, well, I guess so.
So, it's funny? Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because in my manga, it kind of connects with something in my manga. In my manga, I refer to genders as, well, guy and girl. And then, there's some people that aren't gendered because they're different types of creatures. But I use the term guy and girl because I find guy and girl are great ways to define a gender without having the name of another gender in it. Like human, female, woman. So like you've always got man, and then you add the wo at the beginning. But when you say guy, it's just GUI. And when you say girl, it's just GIRL. So it's kind of like they're their own words and they're similar, but they're unique to each other. And I love that. So everybody in my comic when they refer to gender, it's like guy and girl. So I'd probably do that. I'd probably be like, oh, guy, what you doing, guy?
Amazing, man. Okay, cool. So the Kickstarter, it's launched right now, correct? Like this is the time people should jump
Until
in. They should
April 15th. And
until
so if
April
people want to get
15th.
some of that sweet stuff, jump on it, because the higher, like the more amount that I get too, I give out some like rewards. I'm gonna make like keychains and all that sweet anime goody stuff. Like when you go to a talkathon or anime convention, you go down those sweet artist alleys and they've got all these super cool keychains and things. Oh, actually, I can show one thing. I built
There
like
you
this
go.
little acrylic standee. Oh boy, the reflection on this. Anyway, it's basically the character in the background. Her name is Quilma, and she's one of the main characters in my comic. But really, all the students have their moment in the sun. It's just, let's say, like for fun, the main character is a girl named Quilma and a guy named Dom, and you just kind of follow mostly their perspective going through everything. But it does jump every now and then.
Hmm. Well, yeah, you got to. I mean, come on, we're fans of the Tim of the. We're fans of Batman the animated series, that large Justice League universe. We love the Marvel
Yeah,
Cinematic Universe. Every time, in these cartoons where there's all these characters that come, especially Justice League Unlimited, where all of a sudden all these other characters you never really got to appreciate all get their moment in the sun, and that's important. Showing that your world is full is very
yeah.
important,
I
and it's kind
actually
of
have one character that you don't
mm.
see very often, and I do it on purpose because there's always somebody that slinks in the back and they're like, "Oh fuck this day, I don't want to be here." First day of my ass, like they just hang out and they're just kind of like quiet, and it's probably going to be like that the whole book for real. Like there's always one of those people. Like you're still going to get to know them through actions and things that they do and the way they eat because they're not human, right? So some of them literally like will like open up and eat like have a black hole and eat something. Some of them will like touch something and it'll infect it until it's gone and they ate that. Like it's weird. I have to think of weird outside the box stuff like this for aliens. And so you're going to get to know them through little actions such as this. And I'm always wondering in my head, I'm like, man, will this character create a fan base? Like everybody's going to read this. Are they going to be like, oh, I love the extroverted person or this introverted person? Are they going to love that one person in the corner that's just like, fuck this shit?
Well, they have to be there. And
Yeah.
funny thing that you're telling about just background characters. Felicia Hardy in Batman the Animated Series eventually turns into the Black Cat, right? Well, John
Wait, you
wrote
said
her.
that weird. You said
Oh,
Batman series, Felicia Hardy. Sorry, Spidey,
sorry.
right?
Yeah, I'm getting a little sleepy. I'm sorry about
Yeah,
that.
me too, man.
So in Spider-Man the Animated Series, Felicia Hardy turns into the Black Cat eventually, and Felicia Hardy in the comic books is the Black Cat. Now, when John wrote her in to Spider-Man, I'm going to make sure I don't fuck this up, into Spider-Man the Animated Series, he just wanted a blonde girl that wasn't Gwen Stacy because everybody would think that she was just going to get thrown off a bridge and die. So he looked at a comic book and saw this character, Felicia Hardy, and said, "Okay, whatever. Here's another. Here's a blonde person that Peter Parker knows." And
That's cool.
and at conventions they're like, "Oh my god, are you going to turn her into a black cat?" And he's like, "What?" So I guess maybe, I don't know. And then 3 seasons later, man, 3 seasons of her just being Peter's rich friend that he flirts with every now and then, she becomes a pivotal crime fighting character as she did in the comic books,
That's
but with
cool.
no intention of ever doing that. So your guy in the corner could be one of the greatest heroes ever, and he could be in that book for 10 years without doing fucking squat. And that's the beauty of the medium, man. He could be fucking in the corner, and then one day he could be something else. And that's
Yeah.
that's and that's why it's important to just have him exist.
Well, I think people are gonna like that character. They're in the corner, but their people were known for being cannibals, specifically of
Cool.
every other race. So they don't do that anymore. They now have an infinite food source that was supplied to them by the strongest character in my comic. It's just that like they're still weary. Like the rest of the races kind of look at that one and go, I don't believe it. Even though the person that's there is like, well, never doesn't remember their father, who was somebody that was like the leader to it all, and they for sure eaten other of their species when they were younger, but they don't even remember it anymore. It's just they have to deal with that animosity for something that they have no attachment to, and
Sounds
yeah,
familiar.
well, yeah,
Sounds familiar how It sounds familiar. It's kind of like when we're kids and like you like Spider-Man, I like Spider-Man. Let's play. And then when you're teenagers, all of a sudden you're told, "Oh, by the way, the what you wear and the music you listen to is going to somehow classify you into some kind of box and you're not allowed to be over here with somebody else because you've chosen this hairstyle, this wardrobe, and this music choice for some fucking reason."
Yeah, man.
And we don't know why. And it's because the older kids told us that because we were
Yeah.
taught to compartmentalize ourselves. It's not an instinct. It's just what you do, and
And
it's
that's like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go on.
No, please. I'm just like
I was
it's
gonna say like,
fucking
and that's
stupid.
honestly one level of it, and then you have that other level where you like Spider-Man, I like Spider-Man. Let's hang out, and then the parents come out, and for some of you that grew up in Quebec, they're like, "Whoa, hold on, that person's English.
Yeah,
Don't talk to that person."
Mm.
And then your parents are like, "Well, my parents are bilingual," so they're like, "What the hell's the deal? I don't want your son hanging out with my son." I mean, I remember
Yeah.
my first job. I used to. Well, I'm not gonna say exactly where because I don't want to ruffle any
Throw
feathers.
'em-
Although I
throw 'em under.
should.
You don't want to throw them under the bus.
Yeah, but my first job I had, I was 14 years old, and the manager there used to call me Le Style d'Anglais. That was my nickname. That's very insulting, and he called me that all the time. But I was like 14 years old. I didn't know better, and I was used to people calling me that. I was used to it. And it's not the first and only job I had where that happened. And at one point, that happened to me when I was 30, and I literally quit on the spot. And I reported them to the government and the unemployed, like to the I don't know, like the thing that protects employers and stuff like that. And it was a huge deal, but I was just like fed up with it. But yeah, man, like I grew up like that and having to hear that all the time and having to hear all this animosity. And, like my parents are one's English and one's French. And I learned all my French in Nova Scotia. Like I said, I grew up there. So when I moved here, Nova Scotia is like Maritimes, and Maritimes in Canada are very bilingual and very open to it. When you come to Quebec, it's not all like that. And for real, like things are getting better and better with each year. It's just that it was rough, especially in the 90s, for real, like showing up. And even though I could speak French perfectly, I still had a bit of an English accent. And so they knew. And then I'd have to deal with fighting or horrible situations where I'm like, what? I don't get it.
What year did you come here?
98, I believe.
Okay.
It was
You know
98.
what? It was better than it was in 95. It was even worse.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know, man.
Yeah.
I know all about it because my mom's French, so I have family here. So we would come and visit, and it was like, wow. And I didn't get
Yeah.
it as a kid. And then I go back to Nova Scotia, where people, when they would find out I could speak French, were like, "What? That's cool. Learn all those extra languages, you." Like,
Yeah, I just wish someone. Well, my elementary school. I went to a school for kids with like slight learning disabilities and stuff. So they were focusing more on the bare essentials,
Mhm.
but they really kind of like did not try to teach us French, and that's a real shame because it's affected my life greatly, especially living in Quebec.
Yeah.
And it's I wish someone would have told me. I would have volunteered for tutoring had I known about the had I known about the sexuality of French teenage girls versus English teenage girls, where when we were 13, I look at the French sector and they're all making out, and I look at my friends on the English side and they're still playing with their dolls, and I'm just like, I'm in the wrong I learned the wrong fucking language. Shit. Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
anyway.
funny.
Yeah. Anyway, dude, it's been fucking great, man. I'm gonna buy your shit. That's what I'm
Oh,
gonna do
thanks,
now.
man. I super appreciate all the support. For real.
Yeah.
For real, man.
Yeah.
Every dollar, I just take it and I fund it back into trying to achieve my lifelong dream.
How long has this lifelong dream been going so far? How long has Blythe been your so-called Blythe been with us?
So I'm currently halfway through chapter 8. So I'd say roughly 8 years I've been working on it, maybe a little over. And I still have 8 years to go because like all this conversation we're having about, with especially Cyclops being my favorite, I love structure. So I've already written my whole story, start to finish. I know exactly what I need to get done each year and exactly what's going to be told in each year. So I just need to draw it and maybe polish up some of my script every now and then. But so I've got another 8 years to go to finish it. And I'm very disciplined, incredibly dedicated, and super passionate. So I'm going to do it. And what would be amazing is that like at one point, if I could just make this my full-time job, then I might be able to finish it quicker than in 8 years, which would be the dream. I mean, 8 years, man, it's my life's work at this point, you know, working on something for 16 years. That's what I'm doing.
Where can people find you on the social media machine to say, I believe in you, Erik Teren Mullins, like I do?
Well, you look up Erik Teren Mullins. You'll usually find me on Facebook, on Instagram. I actually just got the Twitter. I'm so bad. Oh, man, for real, I spend so much time working on drawing and stuff that marketing is not my strong suit. I try to post every day or every couple of days, you know, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Instagram and Facebook are where I go the most often. But like I said, I'm gonna try and post on Twitter more often. It seems like I have a lot of friends on there, and they're like, "You gotta get on here, man. This is where people are." And I'm like, "Oh, all right."
No, that's where bad people are. Just every time I go on Twitter, it's usually just to defend Kevin Smith or something like that when his He-Man show came out. And I'm just like, man, fucking the He-Man show is great. And they're like, fuck you. And I'm just like, okay, never mind. And I've deleted. Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, but we can't be friends anymore because I don't like that He-Man show.
Oh no.
I'm just messing. It wasn't for me. I didn't watch the second part, but I didn't particularly like the first part.
Second part's really cool, but actually no.
I might watch it at one point.
This is interesting. Nope, it's time for a debate. So why? No, just that's fine. No one has to like anything. I didn't like it. Like people who clearly didn't watch it.
Oh yeah, I watched the first thing, and I loved Orko. I liked his evolution. I thought he was a great character. I think they did a good job. I actually really liked Teela. I've always liked Teela, and I found that her development was rough because she came off as like a jerk. You know, like she doesn't want help from anybody. She's able to do everything super good, and her biggest weakness, you find out through when she was like in hell talking to Skeletor or whatever, is that she's too strong. Like that bugs me. Like you need a real enemy. Like He-Man's enemy was Skeletor. He-Man was so strong, but Skeletor was clever and he had the manpower. So when they would fight, the magic he would use and everything, like it would always be like, okay, kind of even. Is he gonna lose? No, but there's still that edge. But the problem with Teela is everything she did, she was always on top. And it just like I need development, and she didn't have it. And Orko had great development. That's why, like, for me, I was like watching, like, oh, Orko. And Evelyn was great. I thought she was really cool. Like, her evolution seemed really great too. Like, I was more interested in Evelyn than everyone else. And Man at Arms was an effing badass. Like, for real. Like, when he shows up, saves the day, he's like, then they're like, you can leave now. And I'm like, no, he's literally the best guy there. Keep him. And then he's like, okay, I guess I'll go. And it's just like, man, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know. I found that that was my complaint, was just that I found that like a lot of the character development for their main character was weak, and also they shouldn't have called it He-Man because it doesn't really follow He-Man. It's called Masters of the Universe. You're right. Yeah, it's called Masters of the Universe. Yeah, so actually, like that's not so bad. But but even the end, I don't know, kind of bugged me for the end of that first season. But man, again, I'm sticking with my character development.
Okay. That was part 1 of a first season. So that's like me watching, 4 episodes of Demon Slayer and said, I got the whole thing. Yeah. So clearly I didn't. But the thing about Teela is that, well, yeah, she's like, she's a strong, competent person. That's why she was made like, she wasn't a man of arms, but she was given the title of man of arms. But, she is the daughter of the sorceress. They said that in the original series in episode 3. So she's the daughter of Man of Arms and the Sorceress, 2 of the most powerful people in the, non-He-Man people in the entire series. So she's going to be good at some stuff. And, but I probably could have used a couple of more scenes, but the reason why she came off as a jerk is because I have some best friends in the world that I've known for years. And if they had a big secret about himself that a whole group of people knew about except me. I was the only person in an entire group that you have all these adventures with, but you're the only one that gets left out of it. And they're supposed to be the best friends and your family. Like, I get how pissed she was, because I would be kind of pissed too. Now, about her ability and how she's good at stuff, I don't know. I've watched it 2 or 3 times, so I didn't get that as much, but I will say the show is called Master of the Universe, and I got to know Orko, like you said. He was a Master of the Universe, but was kind of the Jar Jar Binks of the original series. So seeing any
Yeah,
arc with him was fucking awesome. Giving Man of Arms more to do was fucking amazing too. Evelyn, all these characters that were the Masters of the Universe, the big wide world. If you watch that old original He-Man cartoon, it is unwatchable without
I
thinking of the ambiguously gay duo
know.
or just in a very comedic sense.
But yeah, its story structure wasn't the
Yeah,
best, and
yeah,
I preferred She-Ra. Honestly, I preferred She-Ra, like the
there you go.
original show, to
Yeah,
the original He-Man, because also
yeah,
the story had more like to be continued. Like a lot of it had a
hmm,
continuation flow, and
yeah, yeah.
I always prefer that over. It's Saturday. Who's the villain of the week? You know, like all right, that gets boring after a while.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, He-Man. It's like, I don't know. Like I watched the original series and there's something about the new one where here he is, like, this is a He-Man that is like fought for years and he's been at the shit. But I also kind of like it when someone's brave enough to kind of self-sacrifice himself to save everybody else. And
Yeah,
I
that's like a
really
hardcore classic.
I really like this scene where at the end of the first episode, which is kind of like the episode all OG fans should have really wanted to see, where all of a sudden the stakes are high and people can, things are dangerous for the first time. I love the fact that like is depowering, and Skeletor is seeing that this guy, this big brute man force that has embarrassed him so many times, was a teenager all along, and I fucking love that. So
Yeah,
the argument that it's not the argument on Twitter, whatever. It was a long pandemic, man. I had less to do fucking 9 months
yeah,
ago. Um, the argument was, oh, He-Man's not in it. They killed my favorite character. You ruined my childhood. It's like I did the math. He-Man is in a flashback or makes an appearance or something. There's one episode he's not in at all. Out of all 8, 9 episodes, he's in every fucking one. So that claim is wrong.
yeah. But
And
I don't really care about He-Man being in the thing. That wasn't really my
yeah, yeah.
point that I was going at. I just
Mm,
thought that storytelling wise, it was like eh. And again, like they made their main character not particularly likable.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, that's a big thing. I like look.
yeah,
It's no. Tila could have been done a little bit better. But it wasn't enough to take me out of it completely.
man.
And
What I would have loved to see is in that series at one point when you see He-Man in like the land of the dead or whatever, or heaven or whatever, and you see Grayskull, like
mm,
for real, make a show about him. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see any of the He-Man stuff. I want to see the origin story about Grayskull. I want to see him build that castle. I want to see where that sword
yeah,
comes from. Like here they are introducing these characters nonchalantly, I might add. They're just like, haha,
yeah.
we're chasing this beast. By the way, I'm the one that created everything. Look how badass I am. Now you'll never see me again. And you're just like, oh no. Well, maybe you do in the second part. I'm just saying that like a
Mm.
whole show about that guy would be cool, man. I would love to see that.
Those were all just limited edition variant action figures. All those ones that you saw in that episode,
For sure.
that was fan service because
Okay.
the original was just a fucking toy commercial. No one gave a shit about anything. They're like, He-Man
Yeah.
fights Skeletor. Yeah, whatever. Let's get some money. All right. Yeah, yeah. He-Man figure, whatever. Yeah, you got a guy that stink or whatever, bro. Yeah, He-Man. It's like that's the creative force behind the original series, somewhat. So all these like He-Man and Grayskull and all this other, these were like hero. These were all like these only buy at convention original action figures that weren't even in the original series that Kevin and the team like said, well, let's make everything matter. Let's like every toy Mattel's making a series. Let's bring it in. Let's make it part of the story.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
I thought that was actually kind of cool. Yeah, it's a little brief, but at the same time, dude, if we're talking like you're picking from obscurity and making
Yeah.
something out of it. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I never really grew up with He-Man. Like I watched all
oh,
of
me
it, but
neither. I
it
think
was
it
never
sucks.
something that I was like, "Way." I was just kind of like,
Yeah.
I actually loved the 2000 series of He-Man,
Yeah, me too.
and
Actually,
I guess I was a little disappointed too that when Kevin Smith decided to take over something and we saw like pictures of the art, it kind of made me think of that 2001, and the 2001 just kind of ended. Like it didn't have a real ending, so I was like, "Oh man, it would
yeah.
be sweet to end that show." But I don't know. I grew up more with like Transformers. Transformers was really a big part of my life.
I
That
miss
and
the
like,
man tree. Dude,
yeah.
we're the same age. Like
Yeah.
my sister's friends, she's about 5 years older than me. My sister's friends, they all loved He-Man. Like that was their generation. By the time we came up, man, it was X-Men time. It was
Yeah.
X-Men. It was Gargoyle time. It was all that it was all that
Samurai
stuff.
Pizza Cats. I don't know if you
Fuck
ever heard that
yeah.
show, but Exo Squads. Exo
Yeah, of
Squads was
course.
nuts. Like that's one of those shows that wasn't for kids at all, man. It was a war. People are dying left and right in the show. I remember seeing it as a kid, and I'm like, wow, those mechs look cool. And then like when I got older and I rewatched it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is like a Game of Thrones for children, I guess. No, not
Yeah.
even. Like it's so well written. Oh man, Exo Squads was sick. And yeah,
It,
Gargoyles, all those shows.
fuck yeah, man. Samurai Pizza Cats on Yumi and YTV. I have an interview with Sonia Ball, who played the voice of Polyester.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
I've been trying to get the other two so much, but those are Montreal voice actors. I had no idea Samurai Pizza Cats was all dubbed in Montreal. No idea.
Yeah,
And
and the funny thing is back then they didn't translate the script because Samurai Pizza Cats in Japan, it's not a comedy. Like it's a kids show, but it's
yeah,
not full of jokes. And then when they got it, they're like, let's just make up our own dub. We'll just and they re-edit it too. Like there's certain episodes where you watch the Japanese one and it plays out, and then when you watch the exact same episode, they've cut the episode up. So it's a totally different show, and you're like, man, they made this their own. Like, and they did such a good job.
so brilliant voice acting. I thought it was so
Yeah.
funny. Like you ever when you're working, you before we go, it's been over 2 hours. We should probably go.
Yeah.
But we're having fun, kids. We're having fun. You ever like listen to Samurai Pizza Cats while working and just spontaneously like laugh out loud all the time? Because I fucking do. As soon as a narrator says anything,
Yeah, I love that narrator, man. When we last saw our pizza cats, they were outrunning a missile, and they're like, "We can't outrun a missile." Nope. And then it hits them, but it doesn't hit them in the anime. But they edit it to look like it hits them, and you're like, "What? This is awesome." Oh man, and
Oh,
just the
man.
little lines. Yeah, that show's great.
yeah, and you know it's great. Blythe, so people support Blythe because he's this is his. I just want to make puns of it and everything. Oh, the real Ghostbusters. Yeah, bringing up the
Oh,
real Ghostbusters. You know what's fascinating? Just a little
mm,
history lesson, kids. The fact that they had to like go through all that trouble because there was already a show called Ghostbusters with like a talking ape, and they
mm.
go and they for some reason they were busting ghosts too. And even like I don't know if you ever seen the movies that made us, but like up until the last minute, they didn't clear the name Ghostbusters, and they were calling themselves Ghost Breakers and
Yeah.
Ghost Smashers and doing alternate takes and shit. Oh man, I love that stuff. I want to see
So
a. Sorry, what?
I
Please.
was gonna say, Real Ghostbusters. I actually
Mm.
recently rewatched all of it, and it's a masterpiece. It's a goddamn masterpiece. There's a Cthulhu episode in there, man. Like this is like the '80s. Like what the heck? They're reading H.P. Lovecraft to get inspiration. So nuts. And then I went through all of Ghostbusters like Extreme, and I loved every second of Extreme Ghostbusters too,
Oh,
man. Like
cool.
watching the original one and then watching Extreme. Extreme is nuts. And the theme song to Extreme would be like the Ghostbusters theme song, but done by Trent Reznor. Like it feels like that, and it's
Oh,
amazing,
cool.
amazing show. Oh, and I don't know if you've seen Extreme Ghostbusters, but
No, barely.
they bring back things from the original series constantly. Like there's this one thing in original Ghostbusters where there's like a ghost and he knocks on kids' windows, and if a kid answers, he kidnaps the kid. Whole episode goes through and everything, and they're like, "I'm pretty sure we got everything." So then, like 10 years later, they come out with Extreme Ghostbusters, and you find one of these kids that went through that when he was younger, and he's mutating and he's turning into one of these ghosts, and you're like, wow, like everything's
Wow.
so connected. Like for real, great show. And like even like I know there's like a guy in a wheelchair, and you think, oh, back in the 90s, he's like, I can do everything, I'm super good, and he's in this wheelchair, and they always bring up that kind of thing, and for him it's toxic. Like it gets to a point where he's almost killing himself to prove he can do everything. And throughout the series he kind of learns, he's like, I can't, like even people that aren't in wheelchairs need help every once in a while. It's not like one episode, it's like you see this guy go through it. Like there's one guy that has a problem with drugs, like all this stuff where you're like, and it's not just in one episode, like it's slow build up. And you even have the original Ghostbusters that come back and they help out every now and then, or they teach them to do stuff. Like Oh man, Extreme Ghostbusters. Just the theme song. Watch it. Think Nine Inch Nails for just the intro, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's cool."
I'm so glad you said this. I was about to fall asleep before, and then I'm like, now I'm so fucking jazzed because I love it when that works. Because other shows like Spider-Man Unlimited don't work. Like,
No, not at all.
no, it's just fucking weird. It's just that's just a big action figure of mind fuck, a big cocaine weekend. I
Yeah,
don't know.
man. That
I
was a
don't
rough
know,
show.
but I was always assumed that Extreme Ghostbusters was some kind of cash grab, and you saying that right now makes me
Incredible show.
really happy because there's
Like I
also this. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say I could go for a live action of that any day. I mean, it hits all the things people are looking for in today's generation. You've got a handicap,
Mm.
you've got the scientist guy who's black, you've got a girl that's like the one that's on top of everything, and then you got a drug dealer kid, but he kind of like becomes a better person as it goes on, and they're all being guided by Egon. Well, they probably have to find another actor for that, unfortunately. I miss Harold Ramis. He's a great writer, but
Mm.
it's just it's so man, the show is awesome. The show is awesome. And in today's day and age, it would fit perfect. You know, like people are always looking for things with diversity and they're shoving diversity into things that don't have it when there's tons of awesome things that already have diversity. It's so
And
cool.
like whatever, we're two baby faced white boys, so like there's a lot of people out there like, what the fuck do you not know about a lack of diversity? But I do know this. I know that when diversity has been in shit, and we're Canadian, we're Montrealers, we've seen it our whole fucking lives. We've seen it in things it's been produced in Canada, especially do fucking Catwalk, Degrassi, man. Like we grew up with it in our fucking bones. But when I see a company put it in for the sake of it and not give a character development to it, they just think, okay, we're diverse now. Look, here's a gay person who likes boys. Well, what else about them? They're gay and they like boys. All right, cool. But what's their favorite color? What are their favorite bands? What's their personality like? Are they fun? Are they funny? Or do they have hopes and dreams? What do they want to be when they grow up? They're gay. And I just wish it would go farther than that when it does happen, because this blanket statement of, yeah, we're diverse now, it's just like, you forgot how to be writers. And when it works great, and when it doesn't work, it does not work at all. And you can clearly see it through Extreme Ghostbusters, like you're saying, where when you have this, or X-Men, giant size X-Men, when it really fucking works. Like, do it for the sake because the art is good, not do it for the sake because it's hip and it's happening. Because I can always see when it's completely just not authentic. It should be done because it's just amazing. Yeah.
On that note, I'm gonna have to let you go, man. It's getting late, and my wife's got
Yeah.
to wake up at 5 in the morning, and she's like, you got to cut it
She's
off, man.
killing you
And
right
she
now. Yeah.
supports me so much. She's
Yeah.
honestly, I love all my supporters online, but my number one supporter is her. She helps me all the time. So I got to let her have her sleep.
Yeah, man.
But
Well, thanks so much for talking with me all these hours, man. It's been fucking great. It's been great getting to know you. And
yeah, man.
everyone out there, support fucking Blythe, man. This is a good look. Eric, what a great fucking dude. And he's
Thanks so
clearly
much,
a great
man.
writer. He cares about
So,
his character. He cares like fuck about his characters. He's got a 16-year plan. Spy his fucking book. This is a guy that's not just doing something for the sake of it because it's cool. He's he's a young George Lucas, not a late 90s George Lucas, a 1970s George Lucas.
actually, I'd like to compare myself with Gene Roddenberry, please.
There you go, please. Okay, cool.
I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I love Star Wars too. Just I'm a big fan of Gene Roddenberry and the universe.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate you so much bringing me on here. It's awesome getting to actually really talk to you for real,
Yeah.
and not like convention, like, hey, what's going on, yo, see ya. But yeah, it's fun.
All right, man. Have yourself a good night. Good night, everybody. It's been really fun hanging out. And yeah, life rules. All right, let's do this.
Thanks so much. Take care, man. Have a good night.
Bye, man.